The absurd is not a concept meant to depress. It is a collision, a crash between the human longing for meaning and a universe that remains stubbornly silent. Albert Camus didn't whisper this truth. He shouted it from the edge of philosophical cliffs. Life, in its rawest form, does not come with a manual, no divine script, no cosmic blueprint, and yet every beating heart aches to make sense of it all. We search for order, justice, reason, but the universe offers none. That tension, that contradiction, is what Camus called the absurd. The absurd. But here's the catch. Camus didn't argue for despair. He didn't say to give up. He said something infinitely more defiant. Live anyway. Rebel. Not through violence or chaos, but through the simple, radical act of living without illusions. He likened it to Sisyphus, cursed to push a boulder up a hill for eternity. But what if, Camus asked, Sisyphus was happy? What if knowing the boulder would roll back down made him even more alive? That's the kind of rebellion Camus demanded, smiling in the face of futility, refusing to surrender to despair. Most people chase meaning in religion, ideology, success, but Camus warned, those are escapes, elegant lies. To embrace the absurd is to strip away the stories we tell ourselves and stand naked in the wild winds of a universe that owes us nothing. It's terrifying and liberating, because once the demand for meaning is abandoned, what's left is freedom. The freedom to create, to love, to choose, not because the universe requires it, but because we do. And in that freedom, life becomes an art, not a task to complete, but a canvas to ruin beautifully. Relationships, laughter, pain, music, none of it matters, and that's what makes it sacred. When nothing is owed, everything becomes a gift. Camus didn't want people to escape the absurd. He wanted them to dance with it, because the most rebellious act in a meaningless world is to live fully, love deeply, and build anyway, to stare into the abyss and wink. Quietism. Quietism isn't apathy. It's not laziness, resignation, or withdrawal from life. It's a deep, deliberate stillness, a way of being that says, maybe the world is loud enough. Maybe the pursuit of more is what makes people feel less. At its core, quietism is the belief that peace isn't found in conquering, performing, or proving, but in surrendering the obsession with desire itself. Not because ambition is wrong, but because it never ends. One craving leads to another, and the finish line keeps moving. Quietism breaks this cycle, not with violence, but with silence. To live with fewer desires is not to live without meaning. It's to stop letting desire be the dictator. In a quietist life, satisfaction is no longer held hostage by achievement. The quietist doesn't rush to argue, doesn't scramble to win, doesn't chase every passing impulse. Instead, they ask, what if everything I'm seeking is already here, beneath all the noise? What if the good life isn't built, but uncovered, beneath the layers of wanting, beneath the constant motion? This philosophy is ancient, found in the mystical branches of Christianity, Taoism, Stoicism, and even early Hindu thought. It whispers the same idea across centuries. The world doesn't need to be conquered. It needs to be accepted. Quietism doesn't require retreating to a cave. It doesn't ask someone to abandon all responsibility. It asks something harder, to stop grasping, to stop measuring worth by productivity, to stop reacting to everything, and in that refusal, to reclaim power. In a world driven by stimulation and speed, quietism is an act of rebellion. Choosing stillness in a society that rewards frenzy is courageous. The quietist listens before they speak. They pause before they act. They allow space between the stimulus and the response, and in that space, they find themselves. Desires still arise, but they no longer drive. Emotions still appear, but they don't overwhelm. Life continues, but it is no longer lived on autopilot. Quietism is not about doing nothing. It's about doing what matters, only when it matters. It's about cultivating an inner state that doesn't rise and fall with every wave. It's not a life of avoidance. It's a life of radical presence. So still, it becomes unshakable. Amore Fati, Nietzsche, Amore Fati isn't just acceptance. It's not passive endurance. It's love, fierce, irrational, radical love for everything that happens, including the pain. Nietzsche didn't say to merely tolerate suffering or grit one's teeth through hardship. He said to embrace it, to kiss it, to want nothing to be different. Not because suffering is good, but because it is, because it was. And to wish it away would be to reject the very path that shaped every scar, every triumph, every lesson that made a life what it is. This idea is so violent to the modern ego that most people reject it outright. Love heartbreak, love failure, love illness, injustice, grief. Amore Fati doesn't ask for approval. It asks for transformation. It's not about pretending pain is pleasant. It's about staring at life's darkest hours and saying, yes, even this. Because to curse the past is to fracture the self. To say, this shouldn't have happened, is to wage war against reality. Nietzsche's remedy? Stop fighting fate. Fall in love with it instead. This is not a philosophy for the faint-hearted. It demands brutal honesty and unflinching courage. To love one's fate is to reclaim it. It is the death of the victim mindset. It means no longer waiting for fairness, for apologies, for the world to make sense. Amore Fati turns every wound into fuel, every betrayal into clarity, every setback into firewood for the soul. The lover of fate doesn't just endure, they alchemize. When someone practices Amore Fati, regret disappears. Bitterness has no foothold. Even the most chaotic, unfair moments of life are woven into the tapestry of meaning. What once seemed like punishment becomes preparation. What once felt like a curse becomes character. Nothing is wasted. Because if the storm made the roots deeper, then let it rain. Nietzsche wanted people to become who they are, and Amore Fati is how that happens. It is not a life without suffering. It is a life made indestructible by it. To love one's fate is not to become numb. It is to feel everything and say yes to it all. Not someday, not when it makes sense, but now, as it is, forever. Reversibility. Reversibility is the quiet unraveling of the line between seer and seen. Merleau-Ponty did not claim that perception is a one-way street, but rather a trembling bridge. When someone touches, they are touched. When they gaze, they are also being gazed at, by the world, by the other, by the thing itself. The boundary between subject and object doesn't just blur, it folds. It collapses into a shimmering loop where what is observed and the one observing are forever tangled in an invisible dance. This isn't poetic metaphor, it's lived reality. When a hand brushes across cloth, the cloth pushes back. When eyes rest on a face, that face alters the one looking. No act of perception is sterile. It leaves a mark. Every moment of awareness is mutual. The world isn't a stage for observation. It's a mirror with memory. And in that mirror, perception becomes intimacy. Not the distance between, but the closeness within. Most people move through life as if they are separate from it, as if they are a mind encased in a skull, gazing out at a world of objects, surfaces, tools. Reversibility collapses that delusion. It whispers a deeper truth that the self is not an island, but a node in a web of perception. What is seen is also shaping the seer. The body is not a machine, it's a lived presence. Eyes are not cameras, they are thresholds. And when one crosses that threshold, they don't just see the world, they enter it. To live with reversibility is to stop treating life like a painting and start moving as if inside the paint. It's to know that every gesture is mutual, that nothing is observed without consequence. And in that knowing, there's a radical tenderness, because if everything seen is also seeing back, then cruelty isn't one-sided. Indifference is never neutral. Even silence speaks. and even the inanimate breathes its presence into the one who notices it. Reversibility doesn't erase the self. It reveals how porous it is, how every thought is shaped by touch, every belief molded by sensation. It invites the question, if everything is always touching back, then what kind of imprint does one leave behind just by being alive? Radical immanence. Radical immanence breaks the illusion that some things are higher, holier, or more real than others. There is no divine staircase, no hidden ladder leading upward. There is only this, the flat, buzzing field of existence where everything touches everything else. Deleuze didn't just argue for equality of being, he stripped away the fantasy that anything ever stood above. Spirit is not superior to matter. Thought does not hover above flesh. The sacred is not out there. It's right here, humming inside the ordinary. This idea is not gentle. It is a demolition. It dismantles the scaffolding that culture has built around value. For centuries, people have been told that certain things are closer to truth, light over dark, mind over body, the eternal over the temporary. Radical immanence tears that hierarchy to the ground. A falling leaf matters as much as a falling empire. A whisper in a quiet room carries the same metaphysical weight as a thunderclap. The world is not divided into layers. It is a field, and everything inside it is vibrating with the same force of being. To truly live in radical immanence is to stop reaching, stop climbing, stop waiting for revelation to descend from some imagined height. Meaning does not live in the clouds. It lives in your hands, in your breath, in the dirt beneath your feet. The smallest moment is not a fragment of something higher. It is the whole. There is no backstage of reality, no curtain to pull back. This is it, and it's enough. The power of this idea lies in its refusal to separate. It won't let you stand above anyone or anything. It demands humility, and in that humility, it offers liberation. If nothing is beneath you, then everything is worth your attention. A stone, a cry, a laugh, a mistake. The boundaries fall, and what's left is connection. No hierarchy, no distance, just life, all at once, all around, and all equally alive. Radical immanence doesn't offer escape. It offers presence, not elevation, but entanglement. And in that entanglement, something sacred awakens, not because it was found, but because it was never separate to begin with. Aestheticism as ethics. Aestheticism as ethics is a rebellion wrapped in elegance. Oscar Wilde didn't just believe beauty mattered, he believed beauty could be a form of morality. In a world obsessed with rigid rules and dusty commandments, Wilde offered something far more subversive. The idea that living beautifully is not a sin, but a virtue. That art is not decoration, it is instruction. That pleasure is not indulgence, it is a kind of truth. To Wilde, ethics didn't have to come dressed in ashes and sackcloth. It could wear silk, it could shimmer. This was not vanity, it was vision. Wilde saw what others couldn't. That ugliness in the soul often begins with the suppression of beauty, that when a person is starved of color, music, expression, they shrivel, they grow bitter, they moralize, but do not live. Aestheticism says, live, feel, create, not recklessly, but richly, not in excess, but in refinement. To cultivate a beautiful life, one must pay attention, one must care, and that caring, Wilde argued, is itself a moral act. Beauty doesn't lie. It either moves you or it doesn't. It strips away pretense. It commands presence. It teaches empathy, because to appreciate something beautiful, you must surrender judgment and open yourself to awe. That moment of surrender is where Wilde saw ethics being born, not from duty, from delight, from the ability to be touched, to be transformed, to treat life not as a trial, but as a canvas. Most philosophies demand sacrifice. Wilde demanded perception. He didn't say ethics was found in sermons. He said it was found in color, in story, in the way someone arranges a room, or writes a sentence. Beauty refines the soul. It doesn't distract from virtue, it becomes it. Not every painting is a sermon, but every truly beautiful thing teaches reverence for detail, for craftsmanship, for feeling. Aestheticism asks not what is allowed, but what is worthy, not what is useful, but what is radiant. Oscar Wilde saw no divide between ethics and aesthetics. He believed how one lives matters as much as why, that a beautiful act, a kind gesture, an honest creation, a well-lived day can be a higher form of morality than any rule followed in fear. The flesh. The flesh is not just skin and bone. It's not a container for consciousness or a tool to be used. For Merleau-Ponty, the flesh is where life happens. It is not separate from thought. It is thought textured. The body is not a puppet moved by the mind. It is the mind's first language. It is memory etched into skin, instinct shaped by time, awareness stretched across nerve and muscle. The body does not carry us through the world. It is how the world is felt, known, and made real. This is not metaphor. This is perception made physical. The hand doesn't just touch, it feels touched. The eye doesn't just see, it is seen by the world it opens to. Every inch of the body is a surface of exchange. The world impresses itself upon the flesh, and the flesh responds, not just passively, but with intelligence, intuition, meaning. To live in a body is not to inhabit a machine. It is to become a threshold, constantly translating experience into sensation, emotion, gesture. In most traditions, the body is treated like a problem, a burden, a distraction from truth. But Merleau-Ponty flips the script. He says the body is not in the way of knowledge, it is knowledge. The heartbeat during fear, the weight in the chest after loss, the way a smell can resurrect a childhood, all of these are truths the mind alone could never generate. The body holds a wisdom that language fumbles to reach. The flesh collapses the boundary between self and world. It doesn't just occupy space, it makes space. The curve of a back in a chair, the pressure of the floor beneath bare feet, the shiver at a lover's breath. These are not extras. They are existence itself, unfolding moment by moment. And to ignore the flesh is to exile oneself from reality. Merleau-Ponty invites us to come back, not in theory, but in sensation, to feel the world again, to let the body guide, teach, and remember. The flesh is not what you wear, it is what you are, a living mirror reflecting life from the inside out. The Kora. The Kora is not a place, and yet it holds all places. It is not a thing, and yet everything comes through it. Plato hinted at it with caution, a strange, formless receptacle where forms themselves are born, a kind of cosmic womb that exists outside the grasp of language or reason. Centuries later, Derrida returned to it, not to define it, but to disturb it further. He treated it like a haunting, something essential, ever present, yet always slipping away the moment you try to name it. The Kora is what receives without possessing. It holds without shaping. It's the space where form is possible, but not yet formed. The paradox is unbearable for the logical mind. How can something exist that is neither being nor non-being, neither substance nor spirit? It doesn't belong to ontology. It is pre-ontological, the in-between, the tremor before birth, the silence before sound, not absence, but readiness, not emptiness, but potential overflowing in stillness. Most people crave answers, categories, firm ground. The Kora laughs at ground. It is the groundless ground. It cannot be touched, but everything touches it. It cannot be seen, but without it, nothing could be visible. It's not God, not matter, not idea. Yet somehow, it is the condition for all three. It doesn't explain the world. It allows the world to happen. And in that allowance, it holds a strange kind of love, a love that doesn't claim, doesn't control, doesn't define, but simply receives. To sit with the Kora is to confront the limits of language. It resists being pinned down. It will not let itself be turned into a system or a rule. It insists on ambiguity, on openness, on the kind of mystery that does not demand solving but invites reverence. It is the philosophical equivalent of standing at the edge of creation and realizing the edge is everywhere. The Kora is not something to be understood. It is something to feel pressing at the edges of understanding. It asks no obedience. It offers no comfort. But in its quiet, terrifying vastness, it reminds us that every form, every word, thought, body, and breath once emerged from something deeper, stranger, and infinitely more spacious than we can ever name. Conceptual persona. The conceptual persona is not a mask. It's a mirror made of thought. Deleuze and Guattari didn't believe philosophers simply thought ideas. They believed philosophers became someone in order to think them. Not actors, not liars, but creators of characters who made ideas breathe. Socrates isn't just a man. He's a conceptual persona. Nietzsche's Zarathustra isn't just a poetic voice. It's a vessel, a myth, a mouth through which truth speaks sideways. Philosophers don't stand outside their thinking. They step inside it, fully costumed, and walk its terrain like dreamers wide awake. This isn't performance for performance's sake. It's necessity. Some truths are too wild to be spoken in the language of logic. Some insights demand a body, a face, a voice that doesn't flinch. Conceptual personas emerge not to entertain, but to survive the fire of thought. They are guides, masks that reveal rather than conceal. Through them, philosophy stops being sterile and becomes something trembling, sweating, bleeding with urgency. Thought stops being a lecture, it becomes a life. To create a conceptual persona is to give birth to a new way of seeing. Each one carves out a different horizon. Diogenes in his barrel, Pascal in his despair, Kierkegaard splitting himself into pseudonyms just to express the torment of faith. These aren't mere authors, they're hosts. Their characters aren't decoration, they are structure. Without them, the ideas fall apart. Deleuze and Guattari weren't calling for fiction. They were calling for transformation. They understood that no one can meet raw truth head-on without shape. The conceptual persona is that shape. It absorbs the danger, holds the contradiction, and lets the thinker stay intact. And sometimes, the persona grows stronger than the person. Sometimes it says what the self is too afraid to admit. To think deeply is to risk shattering. The persona steps in, not to protect, but to speak through the storm. It's not a filter, it's an amplifier. A philosopher without a persona is just an echo, but with one, thought becomes embodied, alive, capable of reaching beyond the academic and touching something primal, something that feels like a whisper and a scream all at once. Philosophy doesn't just think, it becomes, and every conceptual persona is the proof. Hyperstition. Hyperstition is the lie that becomes truth, not because it was ever real, but because people believed in it hard enough to make it real. It begins as fiction, as rumor, as an idea whispered in the dark, and then, slowly, it infects reality. A hyperstition doesn't wait for evidence, it creates it. The story writes the future, and the terrifying beauty of it is this: belief isn't passive, it's generative. What's imagined today becomes what's lived tomorrow. This isn't superstition, it's not magic in the old sense. It's weaponized narrative, a myth so convincing, it alters behavior, rewires perception, shifts economics, changes politics, even transforms the shape of technology. Hyperstitions are the ghosts that haunt the future before they arrive. They are self-fulfilling prophecies with sharp teeth and viral minds. They are futures wearing the mask of possibility until that mask fuses with flesh. Think of a startup pitching a product that doesn't exist yet. Think of ideologies that began as fringe conspiracies and now shape laws. Think of money itself, a fiction so deeply believed it builds cities and ruins empires. Hyperstition doesn't care if something is true, In the traditional sense, it only cares if it spreads, if it sticks, if it mutates minds into making it real. It doesn't wait for the world, it hacks it. What makes Hyperstition dangerous is that it bypasses logic. It taps directly into symbols, fear, desire. It doesn't argue, it seduces, and once the fiction embeds itself in culture, in policy, in technology, is no longer fiction. It has crossed over. Reality is now bent around what began as a whisper. To understand Hyperstition is to understand that the future is not written. It's hallucinated into being. Every viral meme, every new religion, every market craze or moral panic, it all rides the same current. Stories that believe in themselves more than their readers do. Stories that don't die with the author, but resurrect themselves in action, architecture, language. Hyperstition turns imagination into a contagion. It's not just about what is, it's about what becomes. And the most terrifying part is this: the stories most people dismiss today might be laying the tracks for the world they'll wake up in tomorrow. Event Ontology. Event Ontology is not about slow change or gentle realization. It's about rupture. Alain Badiou didn't believe truth emerges from order. He believed it tears through it. Truth, he said, does not unfold. It erupts. It does not ask permission. It does not arrive politely. It crashes through the known world like a storm no one saw coming. And once it strikes, nothing can remain the same. The world before the event is gone, and the world after it has no map. An event is not just something that happens. It is something that shouldn't have happened, according to the rules. It is impossible until it occurs. It breaks logic, it breaks expectation, it breaks history in half. It could be a revolution, a discovery, a love that rewrites the soul. It could be the moment someone stops believing the lie they've built their life around. The event doesn't appear within reality. It redefines it. Badiou believed that real truths come not from systems, but from fidelity to these events. You don't invent the event, you recognize it, and then you choose to stay faithful to what it revealed, even when the world pressures you to forget. That faithfulness is hard. It demands sacrifice, because the event often comes with no guarantees, no applause, no safety net. It asks someone to become someone else, not because they wanted to, but because truth made it impossible not to. In this way, the event is sacred. It is not a trend. It is not a phase. It is the shattering of the known and the sudden emergence of something that must now be lived. Badiou saw 4 domains where events break through: love, politics, science, and art. Each one offers moments where the rules no longer apply and new realities are born, if someone is brave enough to commit to them. Event Ontology is not comfortable. It doesn't offer calm. It offers transformation, and it reminds us that real change is not linear. It's violent. It doesn't wait until we're ready. It arrives when it must. And when it does, everything soft, false, or safe inside us is forced to choose: return to sleep, or live inside the fire of what's now true. The fold is not a metaphor. It's the architecture of everything, of fabric, of thought, of time, of flesh, of reality itself. Leibniz saw it first in the smallest particles of matter, endlessly folding in on themselves, concealing entire worlds inside a single wrinkle. Deleuze expanded it into something more radical: the idea that there is no straight line in the universe, no pure separation, no true outside. Everything folds, and folds again, until what's hidden and what's shown are no longer distinct, just surfaces turning inward and outward, endlessly. To live in a folded world is to abandon binaries. There is no here or there, no this or that, no self and other, only layers, curves, depths, each one containing the next, spiraling forever inward like a map with no edge. The fold undoes the illusion that things must oppose to exist. Darkness doesn't cancel light, it folds into it. The soul doesn't float above the body, it coils within it. Identity isn't fixed, it's a ripple, shifting, overlapping, bleeding into every person ever touched, ever remembered, ever imagined. Most people are trained to seek clarity through separation, good and bad, true and false, mind and matter. But the fold refuses that. It says complexity is not confusion, it's the actual shape of existence. There's no clean break between life and death, thought and sensation, interior and exterior. One becomes the other, always. Boundaries blur, not because they're broken, but because they were never there to begin with. What looks like division is just a tighter twist in the fabric. To understand the fold is to understand that nothing is ever fully revealed, and nothing is ever truly hidden. Every gesture contains echoes. Every word carries sediment. There is no pure presence, only presence that bends, curves, hides inside itself. And this, rather than making reality cold or chaotic, makes it infinite, because a world that folds never ends. It just keeps opening in new directions. The fold is where contradiction dissolves, where duality softens, where the cosmos doesn't expand outward, but inward forever. Not through explosion, but implosion. Depth within depth, meaning inside mystery. And in that endless curvature, the world breathes, never complete, never finished, always folding. Pataphysics. Pataphysics is the science that begins where logic breaks down and never returns. Alfred Jarry didn't invent a theory. He exploded one. Pataphysics is not parody. It's not satire. It is the disciplined worship of the absurd, a philosophy that studies exceptions instead of rules and imaginary solutions instead of real ones. It asks, what if every absurdity has a logic of its own? What if the nonsense is more honest than the sense? In the world of pataphysics, contradictions are sacred, impossibilities are invitations, and reality is only one possibility among many. This is not anti-science. It's science pushed so far that it loops around and devours itself. Pataphysics is rigorous. It builds whole systems of thought just to prove they are meaningless. And in that collapse, something astonishing happens. A different kind of truth appears. Not the truth that fits in textbooks, but the kind that crawls through dreams and jokes and metaphors, so twisted they snap back into clarity. Jerry didn't want to explain the world. He wanted to infect it with laughter. Laughter that is sharp, strange, and utterly liberating. In a pataphysical universe, meaning doesn't march forward. It dances in spirals. The rules are there to be bent until they turn into poetry. Gravity can fall upward. Time can trip over itself. Identity can be worn like a costume and swapped mid-sentence. It's not about escaping reality. It's about revealing its secret flexibility. Pataphysics exposes how much of life is already absurd but pretending not to be. It doesn't mock meaning. It multiplies it until it becomes uncontainable. To live pataphysically is to let imagination become law, not fantasy for escape, but fiction as revolution. It's the art of building invisible cathedrals from nonsense and defending them with perfect sincerity. The pataphysician doesn't ask what's true. They ask what's impossibly true. What could be true in a world one dream away from this one? And when that world becomes visible, everything changes, not because it makes sense, but because it makes more than sense. It makes beauty, it makes mischief, it makes possibility scream. Pataphysics is not a detour, it's a secret passageway, and once you step through, nothing ordinary ever feels solid again. Individuation. Individuation is not a destination. It is not a thing you are. It is a fire you walk through every moment, whether you know it or not. Simon Don shattered the comforting myth of a stable self, the idea that identity is something solid, defined, complete. He replaced it with something far more honest and far more terrifying, The self is in motion, always. Identity is not fixed, it's forming, right now, in every decision, every conflict, every contradiction that refuses to resolve. Most try to lock themselves into an image, a label, a past. They say, "This is who I am," as if the sentence could freeze time. But individuation says no. Who you are is the process of becoming. You are not the outcome. You are the unfolding, the unfinished, the tension between what was and what's trying to emerge. And what's beautiful and unbearable is that this process never stops, not in comfort, not in crisis. The self is not found, it is forged. Simondon saw identity not as a singular, completed unit, but as a negotiation between the individual and the collective, between biology and culture, between what one wants and what the world allows. Identity is a field of forces, a zone of becoming. It is sculpted by every relationship, every rupture, every new environment that destabilizes what once felt certain. Every time something breaks, the process deepens. The self doesn't disappear, it reshapes. This is not about reinvention for applause. It's about transformation as a condition of being alive. To live is to be fluid. To resist that is to suffer. Pain often comes not from change, but from clinging to what no longer fits. Individuation teaches that freedom comes from movement, from letting go of the need to be someone and stepping into the risk of becoming something else. The self is not a noun, it's a verb, and that verb bends through grief, through joy, through silence, through contradiction. You are never done, never finished, and that's the gift, because in a world that wants you static, Simondon offers this: stay open, stay changing, let the fractures shape you, let the process continue. That's not a loss of identity. It's the only way it ever truly exists. Metaxy. Metaxy is the ache of being stretched between two worlds. Plato gave it shape, Simone Weil gave it gravity. It is the condition of standing in between the hunger of the flesh and the pull of the divine, between the dirt of the earth and the light that never fully arrives. To live in metaxy is to live suspended, not fallen, not ascended, just here, trembling in the middle, half shadow, half flame. This is not a flaw. It is the human condition at its most precise. Humans are not beasts, and they are not gods. They reach upward but bleed when they do. They crave purity but carry chaos in their breath. Metaxy isn't the failure to choose one or the other. It is the sacred space where both meet, where longing becomes the soul's true compass, where imperfection becomes the most honest form of worship. Plato saw this in love, in desire, in the strange pull we feel toward beauty, truth, justice, things we've never fully seen, yet ache for as if we once did. That ache is metaxy, the soul remembering what it once touched but cannot hold. Simone Weil lived it more sharply. To her, metaxy was the unbearable tension of seeing suffering and still believing in light, of feeling split and choosing not to numb the pain, but to stay right there, in the in-between, because that's where the real work begins. Metaxy is not comfort. It's not wholeness. It's yearning that doesn't resolve. It's choosing to remain conscious in a world that would rather sedate. It's standing with dirty hands and open eyes and still reaching for what is holy, not because it's close, but because the reaching itself is sacred. And in that reaching, something impossible happens. The divine doesn't descend, the material doesn't disappear, but the space between them begins to glow. To live in metaxy is to be haunted and held. It is to know that one may never arrive, but still walk the path. It is to become the bridge between what is and what should be, between dust and light, between silence and song, not divided, but chosen, not settled, but whole, because one dares to remain in the stretch. Object-oriented ontology. Object-oriented ontology dismantles the human throne. It refuses the ancient arrogance that the world only matters because someone is here to witness it. At its core, this philosophy offers a quiet, unsettling truth. Objects exist in full, rich complexity, whether or not anyone is looking. A mountain doesn't need a hiker to be real. A tree doesn't need a poem to matter. A rock resting at the bottom of the sea lives a life all its own, untouched by human hands, dreams, or metaphors. This is not about cold detachment. It's about deep reverence, because once humans are no longer at the center of being, everything else comes alive in a new way. A door is not just a thing people use. It is a thing with its own presence, its own relations, its own way of existing beyond utility. A cup doesn't exist to be filled. It simply exists, and that existence is not less than yours. It is parallel, different, sacred in its own right. Object-oriented ontology doesn't say humans don't matter. It says humans are not the only ones who matter. It opens the door to a flat metaphysics, where every object, from a candle to a planet, withdraws into its own mystery, because no object can ever be fully known, not even by science, not even by touch. There is always a remainder, a hiddenness, a depth that escapes perception, and that means everything is more than what it seems. Every object is a secret being. Most ways of thinking see the world in terms of what it does for humans, tools, resources, symbols. But this philosophy says the world is not for us. It is with us, around us, beyond us, a swarm of presences that don't need permission to exist. In a culture obsessed with visibility, object-oriented ontology speaks for what remains unseen and insists that what's unseen is just as real, just as vital, just as worthy of wonder. To live with this awareness is to walk differently, to touch things with more humility, to speak less and listen more, to the rustle of leaves, the hum of machines, the quiet authority of things that have never needed us to be what they are. Pharmakon is the word that refuses to choose sides. Derrida unearthed it from ancient texts where it meant both cure and poison, simultaneously, irreducibly, not depending on context, not depending on dose. It is both, at once, a contradiction that doesn't resolve, but deepens. The pharmakon is the medicine that heals and harms, the word that reveals and deceives, the truth that frees and enslaves. It lives in that uncanny space where meaning fractures and multiplies, where certainty goes to die. This is not just a clever linguistic twist. It is a wound in the heart of how people think. The world is taught to divide, good from evil, helpful from harmful, pure from tainted. But Pharmakon makes the knife slip. It says, maybe the very thing that saves you will also ruin you. Maybe the medicine you cling to has always carried venom in its veins. And maybe that doesn't make it false. It makes it real. Derrida saw this in writing itself. In Plato's Phaedrus, writing is called a pharmakon. It preserves knowledge, but also makes memory lazy. It delivers wisdom, but distances us from the voice. It is sacred and it is dangerous, just like every idea, every belief, every system, even love, even language. The same structures that hold people together can pull them apart. The same words that build trust can shatter it, and the same truths that liberate can also trap. To embrace the pharmakon is to stop pretending things are clean. It's to hold complexity in your hands and not demand it simplify. It's to say yes to the mess, yes to the paradox, yes to the uncomfortable fact that nothing is ever just one thing. Every comfort contains a cost. Every poison has its moment of grace. And wisdom is not about choosing sides. It's about seeing the double edge and handling it with care. Pharmakon isn't chaos. It's clarity through contradiction. It teaches that life's most powerful forces are never pure. They're mixed, entangled, dangerous because they matter, and healing because they hurt. The point isn't to avoid the poison. The point is to understand that sometimes the only way to be changed is to swallow it. Negative capability. Negative capability is the rarest kind of strength, the ability to stand inside a question without needing an answer. Keats gave it a name, but it's been lived by poets, mystics, and anyone who's ever stared into the unknown without trying to solve it. It's the art of remaining whole in uncertainty, the bravery to stay in ambiguity without flinching. In a world addicted to clarity, to reason, to conclusions that feel like control, negative capability is a quiet rebellion. It says, not knowing doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're present. Most people panic at the first sign of confusion. They rush to name, to judge, to fix. They fill the silence with noise and call it understanding. But negative capability waits. It listens. It allows mystery to breathe. Keats saw this not as weakness, but as genius. The capacity to dwell in doubts, half-truths, paradoxes, without forcing a resolution is what separates mechanical thought from living intelligence. It's not about abandoning reason. It's about not letting reason flatten the world. This isn't passivity, it's presence. Because when someone can sit with the unknown, they stop grasping and start feeling. They stop reducing things to labels and start seeing the whole trembling shape of reality. Love, death, beauty, pain, these are not problems to be solved. They are experiences to be lived through. And sometimes trying to explain them too quickly is the very thing that kills them. Negative capability doesn't mean giving up on understanding. It means knowing when to stop forcing it. Some of the most powerful truths are felt before they're ever named. Some of the deepest wisdoms dissolve the moment they're over-defined. This capacity to endure uncertainty without retreating into false clarity is what makes art possible, what makes compassion possible, what makes real change possible, because nothing new can emerge in a space already filled with certainty. To practice negative capability is to trust the darkness before the dawn, to allow discomfort to be a teacher, to hold a question in your chest like a sacred ember, not waiting for it to go out, but letting it light the way forward in silence. Not all answers come with words. Some arrive as a deeper kind of quiet. Natality. Natality is not just the fact that humans are born. It's the miracle that they can begin, again and again, in the wreckage of history, in the silence after catastrophe, in the stillness of ordinary days. The capacity to begin anew is the most radical force in human life. Hannah Arendt didn't look to death for meaning. She looked to birth, not just the event of entering the world, but the condition of being someone who can interrupt it, change it, start something that never existed before. In a world obsessed with endings, endings of systems, of lives, of time itself, natality is a defiant whisper that says, it's not over. It's the reminder that every person born carries the potential to rupture repetition, to disrupt fate. It is not hope based on optimism. It is hope carved from action, because natality isn't abstract. It lives in the choices people make, the words they dare to say, the things they build when everyone else is just trying to survive. Arendt saw this power not in grand gestures, but in the simple act of showing up, of speaking when silence is safer, of standing when the world wants kneeling. She believed that politics, at its purest, is rooted in natality, the idea that human beings, through appearing in the world together, create space where the new can be born, not just once, but always. Natality is not innocence. It is not naive. It knows the weight of the past. It carries the scars, but it refuses to let them decide the future. It says that even in the darkest hour, someone might still take the first step towards something better. And that step is not reaction, it's creation. It is not born of what has been, but of what could be. To live with natality is to live with the courage of beginnings, to believe not in perfect outcomes, but in the infinite possibility of starting. It's the moment the page turns, the moment the hand reaches, the moment a stranger becomes a friend, or an idea becomes a movement. Not because the world deserves it, but because humans are capable of it. The ability to begin is not just part of life, it is life. And every new act, every first word, every fragile seed of change is proof that the future still wants to be written. The other in the self. The other in the self is not a metaphor. It's an ethical earthquake. Levinas didn't just ask us to care for others. He claimed the very foundation of the self begins with them. Before freedom, before choice, before thought, there is the face of the other. And in that face, something happens that no logic can fully explain. A demand is made. A silent, sacred responsibility awakens. Not because of a contract or a law or a shared interest, but because the other is, and their existence calls something out of you that didn't exist before. Levinas shattered the illusion of the isolated self. He showed that identity isn't a private fortress, it's a response. You are not a self and then ethical. You become a self through the ethical, through the encounter. The face of the other is not just skin or expression. It's vulnerability, exposure, a plea that doesn't use words but speaks louder than any argument. It says, without saying, do not reduce me, do not consume me, see me, and in doing so become more than you were. Most ethics begin with the self. Levinas begins with the rupture of the self, the interruption, the moment someone else's need, fragility, or pain breaks into your world and makes you answerable, not later, not if you feel like it, now, and without reciprocity. The other is not a mirror. They are not here to complete your journey or confirm your goodness. They are here to undo you, and in that undoing, something deeply human is born. This responsibility is infinite. It cannot be fulfilled or finished, and that is what makes it sacred. You are not called to fix or control the other, but to respond, to witness, to make space, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable, the self does not become real in isolation. It becomes real in the trembling moment when the eyes meet the others and say, without knowing how, I am here for you. Levinas did not ask for agreement. He asked for encounter, and in that encounter, he found the root of all ethics, not in law or logic, but in the raw, unrehearsed, inescapable presence of another human being who breaks your world just by standing in it. Desiring production. Desiring production rips desire away from the cage of absence. Deleuze and Guattari didn't see desire as a hole to be filled or a hunger to be silenced. They saw it as machinery, raw, chaotic, alive. Desire doesn't emerge from lack. It doesn't wait for something missing to call it forth. It produces, it builds, it creates new connections, strange combinations, electric circuits of becoming. It is not a symptom, it is a force, and it never stops. For too long, philosophy treated desire like a sickness. Freud called it a wound. Plato saw it as longing for a higher realm. But Deleuze and Guattari shattered that mold. They said desire doesn't come from a void. It is the process of constructing reality. Every system, every thought, every body is built from desiring machines, tiny, interlocking impulses that drive creation. The world doesn't lack meaning. It overflows with desire's relentless movement. This isn't metaphor. It's ontology. It's the way things are. Desire is not about what's missing. It's about what's possible. And once that shift happens, the entire view of humanity changes. People are not broken things yearning to be fixed. They are producers, assemblers of life, architects of strange joy. Even madness, even chaos, even dreams are forms of desiring production. A schizophrenic breakdown is not a failure. It's a system trying to rebuild itself in real time, through fragments and noise and infinite permutations. To live with desiring production is to stop waiting. To stop believing happiness is on the other side of fulfillment. Desire doesn't lead to a prize. It is the prize. It doesn't need an object. It needs a path, a rhythm, a way of connecting to the world without always trying to possess it. The moment someone believes they are lacking, they've already missed the truth. The machine is running. It never stopped. This is not a license for indulgence. It is a call to create, not out of hunger, but out of abundance, out of motion, out of becoming something the world has never seen before. Desiring production doesn't solve desire. It unleashes it. And in doing so, it invites people to stop chasing what they don't have and start constructing what they do. Disinterestedness. Disinterestedness is not indifference. It is not cold detachment. It is the rare capacity to see something, not for what it can give, not for how it flatters or serves, but simply for what it is. Kant called it the heart of true aesthetic judgment, a kind of vision freed from desire. To judge beauty disinterestedly is to stand before a painting, a face, a sunset, a moment, and allow it to be beautiful without needing to possess it, use it, or have it reflect anything back. This kind of perception is radical in a world driven by utility. Most people are taught to evaluate everything through the lens of gain. Is it useful? Is it profitable? Does it make me feel something I want to feel? Disinterestedness tears through that conditioning. It asks the viewer to suspend the urge to consume, to look without grasping, to appreciate without agenda, and in doing so, it uncovers a deeper kind of beauty, one that cannot be bought, traded, or instrumentalized. Kant believed that when someone experiences disinterested pleasure, they are touching something universal, a moment where the judgment isn't clouded by hunger or ego or expectation. It is a kind of purity, not moral but perceptual, a brief freedom from the self, and in that freedom there is clarity. The beautiful thing stands on its own. It does not belong to the viewer. It does not owe the viewer anything. It is its own reason. This is not easy. The mind rushes to claim, to compare, to interpret, but disinterestedness says, pause, let the object speak in its own language, let it exist without being conquered by meaning. This doesn't diminish the experience, it deepens it, because what is truly beautiful doesn't need to be useful to matter. It doesn't need to entertain or sell or validate. It only needs to be seen, really seen, with eyes that ask for nothing in return. In that act, something profound occurs. The observer becomes witness. The self steps aside, and for a moment, beauty is allowed to shine in its full, untouchable brilliance, liberated from function, from flattery, from the desperate grip of wanting. That is disinterestedness, and in its quiet, reverent gaze, the world reveals its truest face. The unthought. The unthought is not ignorance. It's not what one hasn't learned yet or simply forgotten. It is deeper than forgetting, more intimate than silence. Michel Foucault called it the unthought because it shapes every thought before it even arrives, quietly, invisibly, like the floor beneath one's feet that no one remembers until it trembles. It is the buried architecture that thought walks on, the unseen logic that decides what counts as truth, what questions can be asked, what language can be used, and the terrifying part, most never realize it's there. Foucault didn't believe in pure ideas floating free in some clean, rational sky. He believed in histories, in power, in structures of knowledge so old and embedded they seem like nature. He asked why people think what they think, and then asked what kind of world had to be built for that thinking to feel obvious. The answers always pointed backward, not to individual genius, but to forgotten systems, institutions, discourses, hidden rules wrapped in the illusion of common sense. The unthought is what can't yet be seen, even though it's steering everything. It is not unconscious in a psychological sense. It is cultural, historical, philosophical. It lives in the design of prisons and textbooks, in medical diagnoses and gender roles, in the words people don't have because their world hasn't allowed them to exist. It is what a society has trained itself to never notice, and it is precisely that invisibility that makes it so powerful. To confront the unthought is to become a stranger in your own mind, to realize that even rebellion may already be scripted, that even your doubts might be allowed, pre-approved, pre-contained, and yet in that disorientation, something cracks open, a space where different questions can be asked, not better ones, just truer, more dangerous, more necessary. Foucault didn't want people to escape the unthought. He wanted them to dig into it, to expose it, to name what was once unnamed, not to control it, but to loosen its grip, because the moment it's seen, it stops being fate. And in that moment, the freedom to think differently, wildly, honestly, dangerously, becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. And that's where real thought begins. Worldhood is the understanding that the world is not a warehouse of things. It's a living weave of meaning. Heidegger didn't see existence as a pile of objects waiting to be labeled. He saw it as a structure already charged with significance, where things don't just exist, they show up, they matter. A hammer isn't just metal and wood, it is readiness, usefulness, purpose. A door isn't just a shape, it's the possibility of entering, exiting, welcoming, closing off. The world is not made of stuff, it's made of context, of relationships, of intentions that ripple through everything. Heidegger called it being in the world, not standing outside of it and observing, but being inside of it, entangled, involved. You do not confront the world like a scientist measuring distance. You move through it like someone dancing through a song that already knows your rhythm. This is worldhood. It is the invisible background that gives everything its weight, its place, its feel, and it's so close, so constant that most people never notice it. A cup is not just a cup. It is morning routine, warmth, caffeine, ritual. A sidewalk is not just concrete. It is a path to work, a place where someone cried, a memory of running barefoot in summer. Worldhood is the quiet stage that makes every object meaningful before a word is spoken. It is not the thing itself. It is how the thing shows up, how it fits into the mesh of life, how it becomes real, not in isolation, but in use, in presence, in the flow of being. To see the world this way is to realize that nothing is neutral. Everything is already lit with intention, already part of a story. And so are you. You are not a detached thinker in a sea of matter. You are a participant in a world that is always whispering significance through the smallest gestures, a key turning in a lock, shoes by the door, light falling across a book left open. Worldhood is not a philosophy to memorize. It's a way of waking up, to move through life not as a collector of things, but as a reader of moments, to sense that every object, every place, every breath is part of a structure too vast to name, but too intimate to ignore. This is not a world of things. It is a world of meaning, and you're already inside it. Rhizome. Rhizome is the rebellion against roots that run in only one direction. Deleuze and Guattari looked at the structure of knowledge, of life, of identity, and refused to see a tree. No trunk, no origin, no upward hierarchy. Instead, they saw the rhizome, a wild, underground network with no beginning and no end. It spreads sideways, diagonally, chaotically. It connects anything to anything else. It is non-linear, non-hierarchical, and utterly alive. It doesn't grow up. It grows out. Most knowledge systems are trees. They demand order. One idea must lead to another, cleanly, predictably, with roots sunk deep in some pure origin. The tree says, start here, move there. The rhizome says, start anywhere, connect everything, follow no master. The rhizome doesn't ask for permission. It bypasses gatekeepers. It allows thought to skip, to jump, to link poetry to politics, science to myth, self to stranger. It is the structure of revolution, of becoming, of thinking without fences. In a rhizomatic world, identity is not fixed. It's not a core to be discovered. It's a web to be woven. You are not the result of a linear story. You are an intersection of encounters, sensations, stories that don't match, that contradict, that entangle. And that's not confusion, that's depth. The rhizome thrives on multiplicity. It doesn't care about unity. It feeds on difference, connection, movement. It rejects the demand to trace everything back to one truth, one center, one point of view. To live rhizomatically is to trust the mess, to follow the thread that makes no sense at first, to believe that wisdom might live in strange combinations, in collisions. A conversation overheard in a cafe might shape your politics. A childhood dream might inform your science. The rhizome allows for that. It says, knowledge is not a pyramid, it's a swamp, a field, a storm, and if you move through it with curiosity instead of control, something true will find you, not because you followed the path, but because you dared to leave it. Rhizome is not chaos, it's freedom. It's how the world thinks when no one's watching. It's how meaning spreads when it's allowed to wander. And it's the secret root beneath every act of creation that didn't wait for a map. The in itself for itself. The in itself just is. It sits. It occupies space. It doesn't question, doesn't reflect, doesn't reach beyond its form. A rock is in itself, a table, a tree. Their existence is solid, self-contained, and unaware. They do not ask why they exist. They simply do. Sartre saw this as one mode of being, fixed, complete, closed. And then, against this silent certainty, he placed something utterly different, consciousness, the for itself, a being that knows it is, that sees its own shape from the inside, and knows it is not complete. The for itself is haunted. It lives with absence. It looks at what it is and feels the distance between that and what it could be. It is defined not by solidity, but by lack. A person is not just what they are what they are not yet. Consciousness opens a hole in being. It reflects, it projects, it imagines, it regrets, and in doing so, it lives in tension with the in itself, a tension that cannot be resolved, only endured. Most people assume being is a comfort, a stability. Sartre flips that. To be conscious is to be incomplete. The rock never lies awake at night wondering what it means. The for itself does. It reaches toward a future that doesn't exist yet. It invents goals, stories, versions of the self it aches to become. And yet, those versions are never quite real. Not yet, not fully. So it lives in a state of becoming, always chasing, never arriving. The for itself is freedom, but it's also nausea, because to be conscious is to be free, and to be free is to be responsible. Nothing determines what you are. You must choose, and the weight of that choice, over and over, is unbearable and magnificent. The in itself has no choices, no shame, no hope. The for itself has only choice, and everything that comes with it. Sartre's world is not one of comfort, but of clarity. You are not a thing. You are not fixed. You are not done. You are a question walking through a world of answers that do not satisfy. The in itself just is. The for itself must become, and that gap, that ache, that freedom is what it means to be alive. Thrownness is the quiet violence of arrival. Heidegger didn't speak of birth as a gentle beginning, but as a being hurled, suddenly, involuntarily, into a world already spinning, already full of meanings, systems, languages, and histories we didn't ask for. No one gets to choose their name, their parents, their era, their body, their starting point. You wake up inside it, mid-sentence. And that's the human condition. You are thrown into life and expected to make sense of it. This is not despair, it's recognition. Thrownness means life starts before you do. The stage is set, the lights are on. You stumble out without a script, expected to perform in a drama you didn't audition for. And yet somehow, this is freedom, not the freedom to choose your beginning, but the freedom to respond to it. You didn't get to pick the cards, but you do decide how to play them. Thrownness is why no one starts clean. Every person inherits wounds they didn't earn, beliefs they didn't craft, expectations they never agreed to. Culture presses itself into the skin. Family history whispers through behavior. The world gives you roles before you know what choice even means. But this is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of responsibility. Heidegger didn't say thrownness traps us. He said it defines the space in which we become. To realize you were thrown is to wake up. It's to stop pretending that everything you are is your own invention. It's to stop blaming yourself for the shape of your arrival, but start holding yourself accountable for what comes next. You don't control the storm you landed in, but you do control how you walk through it. Thrownness humbles. It reminds you that no one is self-made, that everyone starts in the middle of something they didn't create. But it also empowers, because from that place, surrounded by chaos, not knowing the rules, you can choose, you can refuse, you can shape what follows. You were thrown, yes, but you are not just what you were thrown into. You are what you make of that landing, and the path you carve from that fall is yours, and yours alone. Care, Sorge. Care is not a feeling. It is not affection or worry or compassion in the sentimental sense. Heidegger called it Sorge, the deep structuring force beneath everything human beings do, say, and are. Care is the foundation. Before thought, before action, before belief, there is care, not as an emotion, but as a way of being. To be human is to care. Even indifference is a form of care turned inward, distorted, denied. You do not choose to care. You are thrown into it, into a world that matters, not because you decided it does, but because it already does the moment you open your eyes. Sorge is what binds a person to their tasks, their relationships, their fears, their hopes. It's why things weigh on you, why choices hurt, why the future whispers and the past won't let go. It's why time is felt, not just measured. You don't hover above the world. You are immersed in it, entangled with it. And this entanglement is care. Even when you're avoiding something, you're still inside it, still wrapped in its significance. Care doesn't stop when you look away. It shapes the looking. Heidegger saw that most people move through life without noticing this undercurrent. They think they're making choices freely, but all choice happens within the horizon of what you care about, the projects you carry, the people you're responsible to, the promises you've made, silently or loudly. And these are not distractions from being. They are the very structure of it. You are not a neutral observer. You are always already involved, always already thrown into concern. Even boredom is not emptiness. It's care twisted back on itself, a yearning for meaningful engagement that hasn't yet arrived. Anxiety, too, is not weakness. It's the pressure of care stretching itself across an uncertain future. To be anxious is not to be broken. It is to be alive in a world that matters deeply, painfully, unavoidably. Care is not what you do. It is what you are. It is the quiet pulse beneath every thought, every step, every breath. Not a choice, but a condition. To be human is to be a creature of concern, and to ignore this is not to escape it, but to be ruled by it in the dark. The light only comes when you see that your being has always been a response, tender, restless, unfinished, to a world that is already calling. Techne versus Episteme. Techne is the sound of hands in motion. Episteme is the structure behind the motion. One builds the boat, the other writes the theory of buoyancy. One knows how to mend a torn coat, the other can explain the physics of tension. Ancient Greek thought separated these two ways of knowing with reverence. Techne, the practical, the skilled, the crafted. Episteme, the contemplative, the theoretical, the universal. But somewhere along the way, the world forgot the weight of calloused hands. Theory was crowned, practice was dismissed, and the balance broke. Techne is not lesser, it is deeper. It is knowledge soaked in repetition, in mistakes, in the body's memory. The blacksmith doesn't need to name the metallurgical principles. The weaver doesn't need to cite a textbook. Their knowing lives in the wrist, in the eyes, in the rhythm of muscle and breath. It is wisdom that doesn't announce itself, but speaks through creation. A sculptor doesn't describe marble. They release what hides inside it. Episteme, on the other hand, is structure. It seeks principles, patterns, abstractions. It asks why and how. It builds systems that float above the mess. Episteme looks at the stars and maps them. It takes 1,000 crafts and tries to unify them under rules. It's essential, but without techne, it floats. Without touch, it forgets the ground it stands on. The tension between techne and episteme is not a rivalry. It's a forgotten marriage. One without the other becomes brittle. Techne without theory can stagnate, repeat without reflection. Episteme without practice can become arrogance, beautiful on paper, useless in life. Together, they make a whole. The carpenter who understands the grain and the geometry, the physician who feels with the hands and understands the science, the thinker who not only dreams, but builds. To restore techne is to honor those who move through the world with skill instead of speech. To restore episteme is to ensure that meaning deepens, not just multiplies. And to bring them together is to recover something ancient and sacred, the idea that wisdom is not just knowing why something works, but how to bring it to life with your own two hands. The gaze. The gaze is not just being looked at, it is being seen into. It is the sudden electric realization that you are not alone inside your skin, that someone else, with their own eyes and judgments and needs, is looking back. Sartre said it first. The moment you feel the gaze of the other, your world changes. You are no longer just yourself. You become an object in their world. You become visible. And with that visibility comes a new kind of vulnerability, a shattering awareness that who you are is no longer yours alone. It's not the physical act of someone staring. It's the internal rupture that occurs when their gaze slices through your solitude. Suddenly you're being interpreted, categorized, desired, rejected, watched. You're no longer the author of your own story. You're a character in theirs, and even if they say nothing, their presence rearranges you. You begin to monitor yourself, perform, protect. The self twists under the weight of being perceived. Lacan pushed this further. He said the gaze doesn't even require someone else to be there. It can be imagined, felt, projected, a glance, a mirror, a camera, a silence too long in a crowded room. The gaze haunts. It invades. It gets under the skin and makes you question where your self ends and the world's version of you begins. It is not an object. It is a force, a pressure, a splitting, and it's not always hostile. The gaze can give love, recognition, intimacy, but it can also colonize, reduce, turn people into roles, symbols, surfaces. This is why it's dangerous, because being seen is not the same as being understood, and when someone sees you through their own hunger, fear, or fantasy, the real you gets buried beneath layers of projection. You become an image, and the image starts to feel more real than the truth. To live under the gaze is to live in negotiation with others, with expectations, with the fractured mirror of your own reflection. You learn to hide certain parts, exaggerate others, forget what it felt like to be whole before you were watched. The gaze is the moment selfhood stops being private and becomes public property, and once that happens, you are never quite alone again. Interpassivity is the strange relief of outsourcing your inner life. It's the moment you let someone else laugh for you, believe for you, cry for you, while you remain still. It's not detachment, it's delegation. You hand over your emotion, your conviction, your experience, not because you don't feel it, but because part of you prefers not to. In interpassivity, the work of enjoyment, belief, even pain, is performed by others, people, media, rituals, machines, so you don't have to carry it directly. The feeling is there but displaced, deferred, rendered at a safe distance. This isn't apathy, it's preservation. It's the spectator at a comedy show who doesn't laugh but feels comforted that the laugh track laughs for them. It's the religious person who no longer prays but finds peace in knowing the ceremony continues elsewhere. It's the parent who lets a cartoon express love to their child, or the citizen who feels pride, not through action, but by watching someone else wave the flag. Interpassivity is the ghost of participation. It lets you feel like you're feeling without being overwhelmed by feeling itself. Slavoj Žižek uncovered this not to mock it, but to expose its subtle power. Interpassivity is how modern life copes with saturation, when there's too much to believe in, too much to respond to, too much to feel. The psyche offloads. It lets art, institutions, avatars do the emoting. This is not deception, it's survival. In a world where sincerity feels dangerous, interpassivity becomes a shield, one that allows connection without full vulnerability, belief without exposure, joy without risk. But this comfort has a cost. The more life is lived through proxies, the more muted the real becomes. You might watch someone on a screen cry over injustice and feel, in that moment, that your moral duty is complete. You might let the symbols do the grieving while you stay intact. The world keeps spinning, but you're only half in it. Your emotions performed elsewhere, your soul standing off stage. Interpassivity doesn't kill feeling, it preserves it in glass. And the challenge is this: will you keep watching others live your convictions, or will you reclaim them? Not perfectly, not dramatically, just directly, because even the most beautiful performance can't feel for you. Not really, only you can. Subtractive ontology. Subtractive ontology is the unsettling idea that being isn't built from what is added, but from what is taken away. Badiou didn't chase presence, he chased the void behind it. For him, being is not a fullness, but a fracture, not a grand accumulation of truths, but a subtraction, a clearing, a silence, a radical absence that allows anything to appear at all. It's not what's there that defines being, it's what resists being named, what slips through every structure, what refuses to belong. Most people seek identity in wholeness. They gather, they define, they stack layers of meaning like bricks. But Badiou flips the entire project of ontology on its head. He says, look instead at the gaps, at the cuts, at the nothing that lives at the core of everything. Because without that nothing, without that foundational emptiness, no structure could stand. Every count starts with a zero. Every form rises from a lack. The void is not outside being. It's its secret architecture. This isn't nihilism. It's not a celebration of despair. It's a call to honesty, to see that being isn't something pure, perfect, or complete. It is ruptured. It is torn open. And in that tear, something begins. Badiou sees truth not as something inherited or discovered, but as something that erupts. When the structure no longer holds, when the count misses a beat, when the excluded element forces itself into view. This is where the new is born, not from order, but from the fracture within it. Subtractive ontology invites a different kind of clarity. It doesn't ask what being is, but what it refuses to be. It doesn't chase presence. It listens to the silence that surrounds it. And that silence isn't passive, it's active. It shapes the edges of what can be said, thought, created. It whispers that every identity, every category, every system is always missing something, and that missing piece is the most real thing of all. To live with subtractive ontology is to stop fearing the void, to stop filling every silence, to recognize that what defines you may not be what you claim, but what you exclude, what you forget, what you leave unnamed. It is to make peace with the part of being that never shows its face, and to see in that absence the beginning of truth, the will to power, The will to power is not a thirst for domination. It's not cruelty dressed up as philosophy. Nietzsche's idea runs deeper than control. It pulses at the heart of life itself. Beneath pleasure, beneath survival, beneath logic or love, he saw one primal force, the will to grow, to expand, to overcome, to become, not in the quiet sense of improvement, but in the roaring sense of force bursting through form. The will to power is not about having power, it's about exerting it. It's energy in motion, life trying to go beyond itself. This isn't just human, it's cosmic. Trees break concrete to reach light. Rivers carve canyons through stone. Cells multiply. Thoughts spiral into revolutions. Everything alive pushes against limits, against stillness, against death. The will to power is not hunger. Hunger is a symptom. The will to power is the engine underneath. The impulse not just to exist, but to matter, to shape the world, to imprint being onto becoming. Nietzsche saw morality, politics, art, all of it, as expressions of this force. Every law, every god, every system of ethics is an attempt to channel it, sometimes to elevate, sometimes to suppress. Slave morality, he argued, was born from weakness, a way to disguise powerlessness as virtue, but real strength, the kind that dances with chaos instead of fleeing from it, comes from those who affirm life without needing permission, those who create new values instead of clinging to old ones, not tyrants, not brutes, but creators, carvers of new paths through the wilderness of becoming. To live with the will to power is not to dominate others, it's to dominate stagnation, to overcome the version of yourself that fears change. It's to expand, not by taking, but by generating, by growing in intensity, in vision, in daring. It means refusing to shrink under comfort, refusing to rot in the safety of the known. Power isn't what you hold, it's what you radiate when you stop apologizing for wanting more than survival. The will to power doesn't whisper, it roars beneath every pulse. And when you stop fearing your own intensity, when you stop asking whether it's allowed, you begin, not to chase life, but to will it, shape it, and watch it burn brighter because of you. Time as duration. Time as duration is not the ticking of a clock. It is not minutes counted or hours lost. Bergson shattered that illusion with something deeper, more intimate. Time as it is lived, not sliced into even parts, but flowing, stretching, pulsing through consciousness like a river with no banks. Duration isn't measurable, it isn't divisible, it bends with emotion, it expands when you wait, it collapses when you're in love, it vanishes in grief, it slows to a crawl in boredom. This is not mechanical time, this is real time, the kind your soul feels even when no second hand moves. Most of the world runs on artificial time. Calendars, deadlines, alarm clocks, schedules that break life into tiny boxes and pretend those boxes are truth. But Bergson saw this as a betrayal, a distortion, because no one feels time the way a watch counts it. 2 hours in a hospital do not weigh the same as 2 hours at the beach. A year of suffering does not pass like a year of joy. Time in the lived sense has depth, weight, texture, and that texture cannot be replicated by numbers. Duration is the heartbeat of memory. It is what allows the past to leak into the present, and the present to reach toward the future. It's why a smell can collapse 10 years in an instant, why a single look can change the shape of a day. In duration, everything is connected. The self doesn't move through time like a train through stops. It becomes through time. It is changed by every second, not parceled into them. And in that becoming, life unfolds, not as a series of points, but as a continuous flow. To live in duration is to step out of the grid, to feel your way through time, not track it, to recognize that some moments are not seconds, they are eternities, and some years vanish like mist. Bergson wasn't trying to destroy science, he was trying to protect experience, because in the rush to measure everything, something essential is lost, the mystery of being alive in time that breathes. Time as duration can't be captured. It can only be lived. And when you stop counting and start feeling, you realize that real time isn't slipping away. It's carrying you moment by moment into everything you're becoming. Symbolic violence. Symbolic violence is the most invisible weapon ever wielded. It doesn't bruise skin or shatter glass. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It hides inside language, customs, tastes, education, posture. Pierre Bourdieu called it violence because it breaks people without needing to touch them. It makes the dominated believe their place is natural, that failure is their fault, that power is earned, not imposed. And because it works silently, it rarely meets resistance. People internalize it, carry it, defend it. This is not about laws, it's about expectations, about what is considered proper, smart, beautiful, normal. Symbolic violence happens when someone is laughed at for the way they speak, when an accent disqualifies intelligence, when working class people feel out of place in art museums or courtrooms or universities, not because they don't belong, but because everything around them says so. It is in the raised eyebrow, the subtle exclusion, the joke that teaches silence. Bourdieu saw culture not as neutral ground, but as a battlefield. Education, fashion, language, these aren't just preferences. They are weapons used by the dominant to maintain dominance. To speak correctly becomes a sign of superiority. To wear the right clothes, like the right music, attend the right schools. These are not just choices. They're signals, currency, and those without it are made to feel inadequate without understanding why. The cruelty of symbolic violence is that it doesn't feel like violence. It feels like failure. It convinces people they are less, not through force, but through comparison, through the silent message that what they are is not enough. And so, they adjust, they mimic, they shrink, not because someone told them to, but because the air around them demanded it. To name symbolic violence is to see the strings behind the show, to realize that what looks like individual weakness is often systemic design. It is not about blame, it's about visibility, because once seen, it can no longer operate in the dark, and the moment someone recognizes that the shame they carry isn't theirs, but planted, something powerful happens. They stop apologizing, they stop shrinking, and they start to reclaim the space, their silence, once protected. Transcendental aesthetic. The transcendental aesthetic is not about beauty. It's about the stage upon which everything appears. Kant argued that space and time aren't things out there waiting to be found. They're not containers that hold the universe. They are within us. They are the invisible lenses through which the world becomes visible at all. Space and time, he said, are not discovered. They are projected. They are not properties of reality itself, but of our mind structure. Without them, there would be no out there, no before, no after, just chaos, just nothingness. This idea ruptures the way most people move through life. The common belief is that time and space exist independently, that they're fixed and external, and we just happen to be moving through them. But Kant turned that inside out. He said space and time are not experienced after perception. They are what make perception possible. They are built into the human condition. Every object you see is not just there, it is there in space and in time because your mind puts it there. This isn't illusion, it's revelation. It means that human consciousness doesn't passively receive the world, it shapes it. The mind is not a mirror, it is an architect, a constructor of the very scaffolding through which anything can appear. Without these structures, there is no sense, no sequence, no separation of things. It's not just that you perceive in space and time, it's that you can't perceive without them. They are not learned, they are prior. They are the silent conditions of experience itself. To grasp the transcendental aesthetic is to realize that what you take as the real world is inseparable from the form your mind gives it, that every room, every distance, every heartbeat measured by a clock is already shaped by a mental framework you did not choose, but which makes your life coherent. Space and time are not optional. They are not outside you. They are the way reality enters through you. This is not a trap, it's a doorway, because in recognizing that space and time are not out there waiting to be decoded, but in here, crafting every experience, you begin to see just how deeply the world and the mind are intertwined, and how every moment is not just passing through you, but being built by you. Hyperreality. Hyperreality is not a future, it's the now that's already slipped. Baudrillard didn't warn that reality might disappear. He argued it already had. That people no longer live in the real, but in layers of simulation so dense, so smooth, they forget there was ever a world behind them. In hyperreality, the copy becomes truer than the original. The symbol replaces the thing, the map outgrows the territory, and the terrifying part is that no one notices. The simulation doesn't hide reality. It erases the need for it. It begins with imitation, then exaggeration, then substitution. A celebrity becomes a brand, a photo becomes an identity, a product becomes a lifestyle. Reality thins. The real gets hollowed out and replaced by an endless feedback loop of signs referring only to other signs. The image of the burger on the billboard looks better than the one you actually eat. The selfie is more important than the moment. Disneyland is more coherent than the city it copies. Hyperreality doesn't mask reality. It replaces it with a version people prefer. Most think simulation is harmless, entertainment, make-believe, but Baudrillard saw it as a virus, replicating, multiplying, replacing depth with surface. And as people consume more images, more content, more spectacle, they lose the ability to tell what's authentic. Not because they're dumb, but because the line no longer exists. The fake becomes desirable. The filtered becomes standard. Reality becomes insufficient, so it gets edited until no one remembers the edit. In hyperreality, even truth becomes aesthetic. Tragedy is only tragic if it's well lit. Beauty is only beauty if it fits the frame. Meaning is only meaning if it trends. And this is the danger. Not that simulation lies, but that it satisfies. It gives people the sensation of reality without the weight of it. And in that sensation, desire is fed, but never fulfilled. Baudrillard didn't offer a solution. He held up a mirror, and in that mirror is a face lit by screens, scrolling endlessly, trying to find something real inside a world made entirely of reflections. Hyperreality is not a glitch. It is the system, and it is seamless. The death of the author. The death of the author is not the end of writing. It's the beginning of freedom. Barthes didn't call for silence. He called for release. The moment a text is written, he argued, the author must vanish. Their intention, their biography, their authority, it dies the instant the words leave their hands, because meaning no longer belongs to them. It belongs to the reader, to the act of reading, to the infinite possibilities of interpretation that live beyond the writer's control. Most people believe that behind every story is a truth, the author's truth, that the meaning of a novel, a poem, a film is buried in the creator's mind, waiting to be excavated. But Barthes shattered that illusion. He said, "Stop digging. The author is not the god of the text. They are not the final voice. They are not the master of what the work must mean, and clinging to their voice kills the wild, living thing the text could become. The reader is not passive. They are not a vessel to be filled. They are the co-creator. Every time a story is read, it becomes something new. A single sentence might echo differently in 100 different minds, and that difference, that explosion of possibility, is what makes meaning powerful, not fixed, but fluid, not owned, but shared. The death of the author is the birth of the reader, the space where literature stops being a message and starts being an encounter. This is not a rejection of craft. It's a rejection of tyranny. The author can write, shape, bleed onto the page, but once the work is out, it no longer belongs to them. It slips from their grasp and becomes part of a larger, messier, more beautiful conversation. One where voices overlap, conflict, reinterpret. One where the text becomes more than it was ever meant to be. Barthes didn't want to destroy authors. He wanted to set readers free, to say, meaning isn't something handed down, it's something drawn out, felt, discovered, not in the author's intention, but in your experience. The death of the author is not an end, it's an opening, and through that opening, stories live again, differently, every time they are read. Ecstatic temporality. Ecstatic temporality is not time as a line. It is not the past left behind, the present passing, and the future waiting ahead. Heidegger broke that illusion with something far stranger and more intimate. Time is not a sequence. It is a unity. The past, present, and future are not separate boxes to move through. They are woven together in a living structure that stretches through you. Time is not something you travel across. It is something you are, and it doesn't flow. You do. Heidegger called it ecstatic, not because it's euphoric, but because it stands outside itself. Each mode of time leans beyond its own edge. The past is not gone. It surges forward in memory, in guilt, in identity. The future is not distant. It presses into the now with urgency, with possibility, with anxiety and hope. And the present, it's not a tiny dot between what was and what will be. It's the clearing where both collide. Time, as lived, is this collision. Most people think of time as something that happens to them, a clock ticking, a countdown. But Heidegger showed that time is not external. It is the horizon of being, the way you exist at all. You remember because you carry the past into this moment. You plan, dream, fear, because the future is already shaping what you do now. And the now only makes sense because of what came before and what might come after. Time, in this sense, isn't chronological. It's existential. Ecstatic temporality is how you care, how you choose, how you become. Every decision is a gesture that reaches into the past and throws itself toward the future. You are not a being in time. You are time becoming a being, and that becoming is never finished. You are stretched across it, anchored by memory, pulled by possibility, grounded in a present that is always trembling. To feel this is to realize that you do not live in time. You are time, layered, haunted, expectant. Your existence is a rhythm of remembering, anticipating, and acting all at once. The past echoes, the future calls, and the present holds them both like open hands. This is ecstatic temporality, not the march of seconds, but the unfolding of a life trying to make meaning within the tension of what was, what is, and what could still be. The real is not reality. It is what reality cannot touch. Lacan drew a line where most people see none, between the world as it is symbolized and the world that slips through the cracks. The real is what language can't reach, what thought cannot wrap itself around, what the unconscious keeps trying to name but never captures. It is the scream behind the word, the trauma that returns over and over, unspoken. It is what resists symbolization, not because it's distant, but because it's too close, too raw, too saturated with truth that burns. Most of life is lived inside the symbolic. Words, rules, identities, these are the frames we use to make the world manageable. The child enters this world by learning language, by taking on names, roles, positions, but the real was there before all of that. It's what gets lost in translation. It's not a place, it's a rupture, a hole, a haunting, and it shows up when the symbolic order breaks down, when the fantasy slips, when the structure collapses, when what shouldn't happen does, and there are no words strong enough to cover it. The real is not a concept to be understood. It is something to be endured, a moment of unbearable intensity, the kind that language chokes on, a grief so vast it has no grammar, a desire so primal it defies form, a flash of terror that doesn't feel like fear, it feels like falling out of meaning itself, and yet it's always there, at the edge of every sentence, behind every dream, in the gaps between what is said and what is meant. The real is not beyond the unconscious. It's within it, pressing, pulsing, threatening to break through. Lacan didn't say the real is evil or good. He said it's unassimilable. That's why it wounds. That's why it returns. The real does not cooperate. It does not explain. It erupts. It interrupts. It's the impossible that keeps happening, the trauma that resists being processed, the truth that cannot be symbolized but still structures desire, fear, and fantasy in silence. To confront the real is not to master it, but to know that beneath every name, every order, every narrative, there is something that cannot be contained, something that stares back and will never blink. Différance. Différance is not a word meant to be understood. It's meant to unmake understanding. Derrida crafted it not to define, but to disturb, to slow thought down, to make language stumble over itself, because at its core, deference is the unraveling of certainty. It says meaning is never final, never fully present, never sitting still. Every word carries with it a trace of other words. Every definition points to another definition. Language is not a mirror of truth. It's a labyrinth. And in that labyrinth, meaning is always deferred, always different, always almost there. This isn't just about language. It's about how reality is built. Every time someone tries to pin down what something means, it slips. The word tree means nothing on its own. It means something only because it is not bush, not sky, not concrete. Meaning is a web of difference, not substance, but spacing, not presence, but delay. The moment you speak, what you mean begins to move away from you. You chase it, you circle it, you almost touch it, but it never arrives complete. Derrida intentionally spelled difference with an A that sounds like an E, so you can't hear the difference, only read it. That invisible shift is the entire point. Meaning doesn't break down with noise. It breaks down with silence, with the things language can't hold, with the space between what is said and what is meant. Every utterance hides another. Every clarity conceals a shadow. To speak is always to betray a little of what you meant to say. Most people crave firm meanings. They want to know what a text means, what a person means, what life means. But difference refuses closure. It whispers that truth isn't behind a locked door. It's the hallway. It's the movement between signs. It's the delay that keeps thought alive. Because if meaning ever fully arrived, if it ever stood still, it would die, it would freeze, and thought would stop breathing. To live with difference is to let go of final answers, to see language not as a container, but as a current, to accept that every word is haunted, every sentence is a compromise, every truth is a trace, and in that endless deferral, there is not confusion, but the beginning of a deeper kind of listening, the veil of Maya. The veil of Maya is the beautiful, aching lie that makes life possible. Schopenhauer borrowed it from ancient Indian philosophy to describe the illusion wrapped around the world, the shimmering surface of appearances that most mistake for truth. According to him, what we see, hear, and touch is not the thing in itself, but a projection, a dream woven by the mind. Behind every color, every form, every sensation, there is something deeper, something unknowable, but most will never reach it because the veil is so convincing, so seductive, it becomes reality itself. This isn't about denying the world, it's about realizing the world is filtered. Perception is not neutral, it's structured by our needs, our instincts, our desire to survive. What we call reality is tailored to human consciousness, shaped by time, space, causality. But none of those things, Schopenhauer argued, exist independently. They're forms of representation, like lenses through which we experience the world, not as it is, but as it appears to us. And what lies beneath that veil? Will, a blind, endless striving, not purpose, not divine plan, just raw, relentless force. Everything from the growth of a tree to the ache of longing is an expression of this will. The world dances in front of us, but it is this will that moves the puppet strings. The illusion is not just in the senses, it's in the belief that life has to be the way it appears, that form is truth, that reason governs being. The veil says this is all there is. Schopenhauer says, don't be so sure. To glimpse behind the veil is not a moment of bliss, it's often one of despair, because once the illusion breaks, so does comfort. The idea that there's justice, that beauty has meaning, that suffering is earned, all of it begins to dissolve. But in that dissolution, something else awakens, compassion. When you see that the world is a shared illusion, you also see that everyone suffers under it. Every life is caught in the same performance, trying to make sense of something senseless. The veil of Maya doesn't disappear, but it can be seen for what it is. And in that recognition, Schopenhauer believed, lies a quiet kind of liberation, not from the world, but from its grip, not in denying life, but in letting go of the illusion that it ever promised clarity. What remains is raw, trembling awareness, and through it, a chance to feel, not in spite of illusion, but because of it, what's most real, eternal recurrence. Eternal recurrence is not a theory, it's a test, a challenge Nietzsche throws like lightning at the soul. What if every moment you live, every breath, every joy, every shame had to be lived again? Not once, not twice, but forever. What if your entire life, in all its mess and brilliance, repeated itself endlessly, exactly as it is? No edits, no erasures, just you, again and again, locked in a loop of your own making. Could you say yes to it? Not just accept it, but embrace it? This is not a metaphysical question. It's a mirror. Eternal recurrence isn't about whether time is circular. It's about whether your life is worth circling. It's Nietzsche's way of forcing the deepest confrontation. If you had to do this forever, would you celebrate or scream? The doctrine is brutal in its simplicity. It doesn't ask you to believe, it dares you to live differently. Because if you knew each choice would echo forever, how carefully would you speak? How fully would you love? How bravely would you forgive? Most live as if there's a backstage, a second draft, a someday when they'll finally begin. But eternal recurrence strips that illusion away. There is no someday, there is only this moment, and its infinite return. Every hesitation is forever, every kindness is eternal, every cowardice, each act of grace, every mischance, it all repeats, carved into the rhythm of being. The weight of this is unbearable unless you choose to rise beneath it. Nietzsche's question is not meant to depress, it's meant to awaken. He doesn't demand perfection, he demands presence. He asks if you can live in such a way that even your failures, your pain, your chaos would be worth repeating because they were fully yours, because they were lived with such intensity, such honesty, that even suffering became sacred. To embrace eternal recurrence is to commit completely to the now, to live without rehearsal, to stop waiting for life to begin and realize it already has and always will. This is not a call to morality, it is a call to aliveness, to courage, to the fierce joy of owning your story so fully that when asked to live it again forever, your answer is not dread, but a fearless, burning yes. Aporia is the silence after every answer collapses. Plato felt it first, in the dialogues that led nowhere, where the more his characters spoke, the less they seemed to know. Derrida deepened it, not as a failure of philosophy, but as its secret engine. Aporia is not confusion, it is confrontation, a moment when thought hits the edge of its own power, when language circles a question so profound, so tangled, that it folds in on itself. It's the crack in the mind where certainty leaks out. Most people run from aporia. They want conclusions. They want the comfort of closure. But aporia is not a dead end. It is a door that refuses to open, not because there's nothing on the other side, but because the key keeps changing shape. It is the moment when every definition feels too small, when every answer feels like a betrayal of the question, when the ground beneath logic shakes and leaves you suspended in midair. Plato did not solve aporia. He staged it. He let Socrates walk his companions to the cliff's edge, dismantle their beliefs with calm precision, and then leave them there, gasping in the unknowing, not out of cruelty, but out of reverence, because to sit in aporia is to be humbled, to realize that knowledge isn't just accumulation, it's also the courage to stand inside the void it cannot fill. Derrida took this further. He said the very structure of meaning is aporetic. Every word carries its opposite. Every concept hides what it excludes. Every clear path is shadowed by its impossibility. The more precisely something is defined, the more tightly it is bound by what it cannot contain. Aporia isn't the crack in the wall, it is the wall, the space where thought vibrates against its own limits. To embrace aporia is to stop demanding answers and start listening to questions, not as problems to be solved, but as places to live. It's the refusal to simplify, the willingness to dwell in contradiction. It is philosophical despair turned into philosophical devotion, a strange kind of clarity born in the refusal to pretend that clarity exists. In aporia, nothing is resolved, and that is where the deepest truths begin, not in what can be said, but in what resists being said and still speaks anyway. The state of exception. The state of exception is not a breakdown of law, it's where law shows its true face. Agamben tore away the veil of legitimacy to reveal something colder, more disturbing. Power does not simply enforce rules, it defines itself by its ability to suspend them. The sovereign is not the one who obeys the law, but the one who decides when the law no longer applies. And in that moment, when the rules are paused, when the norm is halted, power is at its most naked, its most dangerous, its most real. This isn't a rare event. It's not a glitch. The state of exception isn't an emergency. It's a technique. It's the way modern authority preserves itself while pretending to serve order. A disaster is declared. A threat is named. Rights are revoked temporarily. But temporary becomes indefinite. Borders close. People disappear into systems with no rules. And the terrifying part is that it all happens inside the framework of legality. The law does not end. It steps aside. And in the space it leaves, power mutates. Agamben traced this logic back to ancient Rome, to the figure of the Homo sacer, a person who could be killed but not sacrificed, a life excluded from protection but still bound to the political order. Today, the Homo sacer is everywhere. The detainee, the refugee, the prisoner without trial, the person stripped of rights in the name of preserving the rights of others, the one made invisible by the law so that the law can appear stable. Most people think tyranny arrives with a crash, but the state of exception arrives quietly, with signatures and protocols. It declares itself necessary. It promises to protect, and all the while it redraws the boundary between who counts and who doesn't, between whose life is grievable and whose is not. Agamben's warning is this: the moment law allows itself to be suspended, it becomes something else, not justice, not safety, but pure, unaccountable force. To see the state of exception is to see how fear is used as a scalpel, how legality can be weaponized against life itself, and how the real danger is not lawlessness, but law that can vanish when it's no longer convenient. That is where sovereignty hides, not in the enforcement of rules, but in the quiet power to make them disappear. Being towards death. Being towards death is not a morbid fixation. It is not obsession with dying. It is the fierce clarity that comes when one finally sees death, not as an event that happens at the end, but as the very shape of life itself. Heidegger didn't treat death as something to fear or avoid. He treated it as the mirror in which life becomes honest. To be is to be on the way to not being, and it's only when this is faced, not abstractly, but personally, that life stops being a performance and starts becoming real. Most people treat death like a rumor. They surround it with noise, distractions, rituals, euphemisms. But for Heidegger, this is precisely what prevents authenticity. To live as if death is not always near is to live in denial. It's to drift in the anonymity of the crowd, doing what one does, never pausing to ask what you must do. But when death is truly acknowledged, not as a statistic, not as an idea, but as yours, everything changes. Time thickens, choices sharpen, the trivial falls away. Being towards death isn't about thinking of death all day. It's about allowing its presence to strip life bare of illusion. Because when death is real, procrastination becomes cowardice, and every moment becomes finite, urgent, heavy with meaning. You stop pretending there will be endless tomorrows. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions. You begin to choose, not passively, but from the depth of your own being. Death becomes the limit that reveals what matters. It is not about despair. It is about freedom, because when nothing is guaranteed, when no future is promised, you are finally returned to the only thing that has ever been truly yours, the present. And from this present, you can live not as an echo of others, but as yourself, not running from death, but walking toward it, head up, eyes open, fully awake. Being towards death is not a mood. It is a way of being, a way of saying yes to life, not because it is eternal, but because it isn't. Death does not diminish life. It demands that you live it, not in theory, but in truth, not tomorrow, now. Noumenon versus phenomenon. Kant drew a line through reality, a line no human mind can ever fully cross. On one side is the phenomenon, the world as it appears, the sounds you hear, the colors you see, the textures you feel, everything touched by perception, shaped by space, filtered through time. This is the world you know, not because it's false, but because it's tailored, structured by the mind's own architecture, reality as it shows itself to you. But behind the veil of perception lies something else, something raw, untouched, unreachable. The noumenon, the thing in itself, not what something seems to be, but what it is, independent of observation, not bent by the lenses of human senses, not folded into language, not caught in categories. It is pure being, pure realness, and it is, by Kant's account, forever hidden. This is not skepticism, it's precision. Kant wasn't saying reality is an illusion. He was saying perception is a collaboration. The mind brings something to every experience, space, time, causality. These aren't out there in the world. They're built-in tools for making the world intelligible. So what you perceive is not the noumenon, it's the phenomenon, dressed in the garments of human understanding. And that means every experience is partial. Every truth is conditional. You are not accessing things as they are, but as they are for you. The nominal world remains just out of reach, not because you're not looking hard enough, but because looking itself is the problem. To know the thing in itself would require escaping your own mind, and that is impossible. Most people live as if seeing is knowing, as if the real is whatever appears before the eyes. But Kant's insight dismantles that comfort. There is always more, always something withdrawn. The truth of things hums beneath appearances, unspoken, untouched. And while you may never grasp it, you can live with the humility that your knowledge is never complete. To walk through the world knowing this is not to despair. It is to approach everything with awe, with a softness, with the understanding that every object, every person, every moment is more than it seems, not because it hides something sinister, but because it contains depths no mind can fully name. What you see is not all there is. What you touch is not all that's there. And the space between knowing and being, that quiet gap, is where reverence begins. Deterritorialization. Deterritorialization is the moment a boundary breaks and everything spills. A line once drawn between identity and place, thought and structure, self and system, suddenly erases itself. Deleuze and Guattari didn't just describe geography. They described the inner map of meaning and what happens when that map dissolves. Deterritorialization is not destruction, it's movement, a wild, pulsing flight from the familiar, from the rules that kept everything ordered and still. It's the unmaking of control, but not into chaos, into potential, into becoming. Territory is what makes people feel safe. It's home, language, job titles, belief systems. It's the set of meanings that tell someone who they are and where they belong. But territory is also a trap. It stabilizes identity at the cost of freedom, and every system, political, psychological, social, is built to maintain its boundaries. Deterritorialization begins when those boundaries no longer hold, when someone leaves the job that defined them, when a word slips into a new tongue, when a desire erupts that no structure can contain. It happens slowly, then all at once. A song migrates across cultures and becomes something else. A ritual loses its meaning and becomes aesthetic. A person leaves home and forgets how to return. What once anchored now untethers, and in that untethering, something frightening and beautiful occurs. A space opens up, a space where new meanings form, new patterns emerge, and identity becomes fluid again, not fixed, but flux. This doesn't mean anything goes, it means everything moves. The deterritorialized self doesn't dissolve into nothing, it spreads, it picks up pieces, leaks across categories, redefines what it touches, and in doing so, it becomes more real than any stable identity ever could, not because it has a new home, but because it learns how to keep moving, how to live without needing the map to stay the same. To deterritorialize is to disobey the comfort of edges, to allow a thought, a word, a life to escape its assigned role. It's not escape for escape's sake, it's escape for growth, for creativity, for truth that can't be spoken inside the lines it shatters. And once it starts, the world doesn't get smaller. It expands violently, endlessly, freely. Aion versus Chronos. Aion is the time that does not tick. It has no clock face, no calendar, no hands moving in circles. It is infinite, weightless, and ungraspable. It is the time of becoming, of eternity unfolding without edges. Chronos, in contrast, is time as most know it, measured, numbered, marching forward with deadlines and memories. Chronos slices life into pieces. Aion lets it spill. And in this ancient stoic contrast, later awakened by Deleuze, lies a profound shift in how reality can be lived. Chronos is the world of cause and effect. Morning, noon, night, birth, decay, death. It is time that can be managed, monetized, scheduled. It is useful, but it is heavy. It binds the self to identity, to pressure, to a story with a beginning and an end. Most people are trapped here, counting minutes as if meaning lies in the count itself. But Aion drifts outside this prison. It is the eternal now, where past and future fold into the present, not as sequence, but as vibration. It is not the time of clocks, it is the time of change. Deleuze revived Aion not as a fantasy, but as a force. Aion is the time of the event, the transformation, the rupture. It doesn't move forward, it erupts. When something happens that can't be reduced to sequence, love at first sight, the instant of grief, the flash of insight, that is Aion cutting through Chronos, an eternal slice inside the temporary, a ripple that echoes forever without ever needing to last. Chronos wants control. Ion wants intensity. Chronos asks, what time is it? Ion asks, what is happening right now that could never happen again, even if it looks the same? And in that question, identity loosens, because in Ion, you are not a linear story. You are a becoming, a field of forces, a surface constantly folding into itself with no clear origin, no fixed destination. To live only in Chronos is to age. To live even briefly in Ion is to arrive, to be pulled into a moment so rich it refuses to pass. Ion is the now that doesn't end, the past that hasn't left, the future already stirring. And once you've felt it, even for a breath, Chronos can no longer fully hold you, because you've touched the timeless, and the timeless never lets go. Language games. Language games are how words come alive. Wittgenstein shattered the illusion that language gets its meaning from strict definitions, as if words were fixed coins with permanent value. He argued something far more human and far more profound. Meaning is not carved into the word itself. It's born from how the word is used, where, when, and by whom. Language is not a mirror of reality. It's a tool shaped by its function, a living activity, not a static code. A word doesn't carry meaning like a box carries an object. It performs. It dances in context. Game can mean chess, football, hide and seek. Each use is different, and yet they all fall under one shared thread, not because of a single universal rule, but because of overlapping patterns, a family resemblance. This is the heart of language games. There is no essence, only usage, and to understand language is to understand the way it moves in life. Most people treat language like math, seeking precision, absolutes, airtight logic. But Wittgenstein reminds us, human language is messy. It's woven into our actions, our needs, our culture. It's not just about naming, it's about doing. Saying I promise isn't just reporting a feeling, it is the act. I do isn't a description, it's a transformation. Words don't just mean, they act. They change reality when spoken in the right game. Language games are not played in isolation. They are deeply social. A child learns what pain means not by reading a definition, but by watching others respond, by seeing how the word lives inside a cry, a touch, a flinch. Meaning is absorbed through the rhythm of life, not dissected but lived. To understand a language game is to know when to speak, how to listen, when a joke lands, when silence says everything. It's knowing that I'm fine doesn't always mean fine, that we should talk never means just talk. Words carry their weight not through logic, but through use, through history, through play. Wittgenstein didn't reduce language, he set it free. And once you see language as games we play, not truths we discover, the world doesn't lose meaning, it gains it. In every word spoken, something is being done, and behind every conversation, there's a game being played, if only you know how to hear it. Phenomenological reduction. Phenomenological reduction is the art of letting go. Husserl called it epoche, the act of suspending judgment, of placing every assumption in brackets, not to discard it, but to see what's left when belief falls silent. It's a method, but it feels more like a surrender, a stripping down, a refusal to jump to conclusions about what the world is or what things mean before actually meeting them. The goal is not objectivity, it's purity, of experience, of attention, of consciousness, return to its rawest state. The world is usually seen through layers of habit, culture, expectation. Someone sees a tree, but what they really see is their idea of a tree. They don't meet the object, they meet their memory, their language, their past conclusions. Husserl's reduction says, stop, slow down, take away all those filters, set aside the natural attitude that assumes things are just there as given facts. Begin again, not with knowledge, but with experience. Before meaning, before science, before name. What remains is the phenomenon, not as it exists out there, but as it appears to you. Not the object in itself, but the way it shows up in your field of consciousness, the gleam of light on glass, the way time slows when you're waiting, the texture of a moment as it unfolds, not what it is, but how it is. This is not detachment from the world, it is intimacy with it. To practice reduction is to stop trying to conquer the real and instead receive it, as if for the first time. Phenomenological reduction is radical, not because it offers answers, but because it dares to ask what has always been overlooked. It peels away the assumed and leaves the immediate. It doesn't reduce the world to data. It elevates the experience of being in the world as something sacred. A cup is not just a tool, it is warmth, weight, color, memory. A gesture is not just motion, it is intention, tension, connection. To live even briefly in this state is to touch life without the noise, to see not just what is seen, but the seeing itself, to hold perception as a miracle, not a mechanism. And in that quiet bracketing of the world begins to speak, not louder, but more truly. Dasein. Dasein is not just a word for human existence, it's a call to wake up. Heidegger didn't define it as a person or a soul or a thinking subject. He meant something deeper, something harder to face. Dasein is the being that asks what it means to be. It is existence turned back on itself. Not just living, but knowing that one lives. Not just being in the world, but being aware that the world is temporary and that the self is fragile, finite, always becoming. Most creatures simply exist. They eat, move, sleep, react. But Dasein is different. Dasein is aware that it is in time, that it is moving toward death, that it is surrounded by meaning, and yet responsible for making that meaning real. It is not a passive presence. It is an active questioning, a trembling awareness that asks, who am I really? What am I doing here? And what will I do with this short, burning span of time I've been given? Heidegger didn't separate Dasein from the world. It is being in the world, not as an observer, but as someone entangled in it, thrown into a specific life, with language, culture, family, tools, limits. You don't choose your entry. You arrive already involved, already shaped, and yet, within that thrownness, there is freedom. The freedom to choose, the freedom to care, the freedom to live authentically, or not. Authenticity, for Heidegger, isn't about being unique. It's about owning your being, about recognizing that no one else can die your death, that no one else can live your life. Most people flee this responsibility. They hide in the they, doing what others do, thinking what others think, losing themselves in the noise of the crowd. But Dasein, when fully awake, sees through that. It feels the weight of being and the urgency of living it on its own terms. Dasein is not a concept to master. It's a mirror, a challenge, a question that can't be answered with facts but only with how one chooses to live. It is the raw presence of being that knows it is temporary, and in that knowledge it finds both its anxiety and its possibility. To be Dasein is to be unfinished, a being for whom being is always still unfolding. Will to live. The will to live is not noble, it is not rational, it is not even conscious. Schopenhauer saw it as the raw, pulsing engine behind everything, a blind force that drives all beings to exist, to strive, to cling, no matter the cost. It is not the intellect that rules life. It is will, not will as choice or purpose, but will as compulsion, as hunger, as repetition. Life doesn't want meaning. Life just wants to continue, even in suffering, especially in suffering, because for the will, pain is irrelevant if it means the game goes on. This was not a celebration. It was a diagnosis. Schopenhauer peeled back the illusions of reason, morality, and progress to expose something deeper and darker. Existence is not a gift. It is a craving, a need without object, a thirst that cannot be quenched. The tree stretches toward the light not because it knows, but because it must. The animal flees danger not because it calculates, but because something ancient inside pushes it to run. And humans, despite all their thought, their systems, their philosophies, are no different. Everything is driven. Everything is restless. Desire births more desire. Achievement is followed not by peace, but by a new hunger. This is the trap of the will. It uses you. It drives through you. It makes you chase things that, when caught, leave you empty. And yet you keep chasing, because to stop would be to negate the will itself, and the will does not tolerate stillness. It abhors quiet. It demands continuation. Most people call this vitality. Schopenhauer called it torment. He saw the endless striving not as progress, but as imprisonment. The will is not evil, but it is indifferent. It drives the mother to protect, the addict to relapse, the artist to create, and the killer to destroy. It is the same current under every wave, and it does not stop, even when it hurts you, especially when it hurts you. To see the will to live is to recognize that freedom does not come from following desire, but from seeing through it, from stepping outside the storm, even if only for a moment. The only true peace, Schopenhauer believed, is in silencing the will, not in death, but in detachment, in renunciation, in the rare, defiant act of saying, I see you, and I will not follow. Authenticity. Authenticity is not comfort. It is not ease. It is the ache of refusing to lie to yourself, even when the lie is safer. In existentialism, authenticity is not about finding a fixed identity or living some ideal version of yourself. It is about facing the raw, trembling truth that you must create your life, moment by moment, without a script, without guarantees. It is choosing to live in full awareness that there is no grand design, no cosmic approval, only your choices, your freedom, your responsibility. The world hands out masks. It offers roles, worker, friend, lover, citizen, believer, and tells you, be this. But authenticity begins when you stop letting the world define you, when you stop performing for an audience that isn't really watching. It is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's the quiet, radical act of standing inside your own skin and saying, this is mine, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Sartre warned of bad faith, the way people convince themselves they have no choice, that they are just their job, their pass, their duty. But authenticity shatters that illusion. It is the refusal to become a thing, a refusal to collapse into a role. It says, you are not a noun, you are a verb, a becoming, a project never complete. And to live authentically is to step into that freedom, even when it burns. Authenticity is terrifying because it strips away excuses. You can no longer blame the system, your upbringing, or your fear. Every action becomes yours, and with that comes a strange beauty. Nothing is predetermined. Every moment is a chance to return to yourself, to choose again, to carve meaning where none is given. It doesn't mean rejecting connection or responsibility. It means taking them seriously, showing up in relationships not as a role, but as a being in flux, speaking the truth even when your voice shakes, admitting you don't know but staying present anyway. It's not about being bold, it's about being honest with yourself, with the world, with the silence in between. To live authentically is to walk a path without signs, knowing the path is being made with every step, not to follow, but to create, not to be defined, but to define, not to be right, but to be real. The categorical imperative. The categorical imperative is a blade, sharp, clean, and mercilessly honest. Kant offered it not as advice, but as a command carved into the heart of reason itself. Act only on that principle, which you would will to become universal law. No exceptions, no excuses. If you lie, you must be willing to say that everyone should lie. If you steal, you must be willing to live in a world where theft is always right. It is not about what you want. It is about what you would make sacred for all. This is not morality by emotion. It is not about kindness or empathy or consequence. It is about coherence, integrity. The principle must be able to stand without contradiction. A lie cannot be universalized, because if everyone lies, truth ceases to mean anything, and lying collapses in on itself. Cheating, violence, manipulation, they all implode when held up to the test. The categorical imperative does not punish. It reveals. It shines a light on the hidden rot beneath justifications and says, if this action became a rule for the world, would the world still hold? Most ethics lean on outcomes. They ask what will happen. Kant asked something harder. What if this act becomes law? Not by legislation, but by logic, by moral necessity. He believed the dignity of human life lies in its ability to legislate itself, to be free, not by doing whatever it wants, but by choosing to live by principles that everyone could live by. That is true freedom, not impulse, not chaos, but a self-given law that does not crumble when extended to others. The categorical imperative isn't gentle. It doesn't bend to desire or circumstance. It doesn't change based on who you are or what's at stake. It is the same for the emperor and the prisoner, and that's what makes it terrifying, because it removes every mask, every rationalization. It asks, if your actions were the blueprint for humanity, would that world be just? To live by the categorical imperative is not to be perfect. It is to be accountable. It is to see each choice as a thread in the fabric of something far larger than yourself. It is to act not as if someone is watching, but as if the universe is watching what kind of world you are making with your every decision. Freedom as recognition. Freedom, in Hegel's vision, is not isolation. It is not the ability to act without interference or the romantic image of standing alone, untouched by the world. That kind of freedom is hollow, an echo bouncing off the walls of the self. True freedom, Hegel insisted, is born in the space between. It lives in recognition, in the eyes of another who does not control you, but sees you, acknowledges you, and in doing so allows you to become fully real. Most people think freedom means doing whatever they want, but that's not freedom. That's impulse. That's ego still trapped inside itself. Hegel saw that real freedom begins when two beings stand face to face and recognize each other, not as tools, not as enemies, not as mirrors, but as subjects, as equals in the struggle to be seen and known. And it is a struggle. Recognition is not given, it is wrestled into being. This is why Hegel spoke of the master and the slave, not as fixed identities, but as a dynamic. The master demands recognition, but denies it in return. The slave serves, but through work and suffering, begins to shape the world, and in doing so, begins to shape the self. The master, in refusing to recognize the other's freedom, ultimately empties his own, and the slave, in the act of shaping reality, begins to awaken. Freedom is not won through domination. It is lost in it. It can only thrive where recognition flows both ways. To be free is not to be untouched. It is to be seen and to see in return. It is to risk the vulnerability of being known, to step into a relationship where your identity is not fixed by power, but discovered in dialogue. Recognition is not flattery. It is not agreement. It is the acknowledgement that the other is as real, as deep, as free as you are, and that only in that mutual recognition can your own freedom come alive. Hegel's freedom is not about escape. It is about encounter. It's about standing in the open space between self and other and daring to say, I see you. Do you see me? Only there, where the self is mirrored but not consumed, challenged but not erased, can freedom breathe. Not as a right, but as a relation. Not as a possession, but as a becoming. Bad faith. Bad faith is the quiet lie told not to others, but to oneself. Sartre saw it as the most subtle form of self-deception, not because it is loud, but because it is comforting. It is the moment you pretend you are not free, not responsible, not the author of your own life. It is hiding inside a role, a routine, an identity, and saying, "This is just the way it is." It is convincing yourself that your hands are tied, when in truth, you are the one holding the rope. Bad faith is not ignorance. It is knowing and choosing not to know. It is the waiter who performs politeness so mechanically that he becomes the role, believing he is nothing more than a waiter, because it's easier than facing the fact that he could quit, scream, change, walk away. It is the lover who convinces herself she has no choice but to stay. It is the soldier who says he was just following orders, the adult who still blames their childhood, the dreamer who keeps dreaming but never acts. Bad faith is not a mistake, it's an escape. Sartre's philosophy offers no exits. Freedom is absolute. There is no essence, no fixed identity, no cosmic excuse. You are condemned to be free, and that means every choice, every silence, every avoidance is yours. Bad faith is the mask you wear to hide from that unbearable truth. It's the story you tell so you don't have to look in the mirror and admit, "This life is mine," all of it. But bad faith is fragile. It cracks under pressure. A single, honest moment can shatter it. That's why people fear stillness, fear solitude, because in those spaces, the lies slip and the truth of freedom seeps through. And with that truth comes weight, responsibility, the realization that you are always choosing, even when you pretend not to be. To live without bad faith is not to be fearless. It is to be honest. It is to look at your life and say, "I am the one making this real." It is to stop hiding behind roles and start becoming what only you can choose to be. Because in every moment, Sartre believed, you are writing the script, and bad faith is the refusal to pick up the pen. Utility maximization. Utility maximization is the moral compass sharpened by numbers, designed to cut through complexity with one question: what action produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number? For utilitarianism, this is not just a rule, it is the rule, the scale against which all choices must be weighed. Pain and pleasure are not decorations of life, they are its substance. And a good act in this view is not one born from duty, law, or intention. It is one that increases the total sum of well-being in the world, even by a fraction. This principle sounds simple, but it is relentless. It demands that emotions step aside and that personal loyalty surrender to the greater good. Save one friend or 5 strangers? The calculus is clear. Choose comfort or donate to those in need. The answer is waiting, cold, and certain. Utility doesn't care how you feel about it. It cares what the outcome is. It's not about being noble, it's about being effective. Because every choice, no matter how small, shifts the total balance of joy and suffering in the world. For Bentham, all pleasure counted. For Mill, higher pleasures, those of the mind, of art, of growth, carried greater weight. But both believe that morality isn't a mystery, it's a ledger, a reckoning. The right thing to do is the thing that brings the most good, for the most people, for the longest time. This is ethics stripped of divine command, of rigid tradition. This is morality as mathematics, with real lives hanging in the balance. And yet, the clarity of this idea is also its torment, because what if the right thing hurts you? What if the action that brings the greatest good comes at the cost of your peace, your love, your identity? Utility doesn't flinch. It answers. It tells you to sacrifice if the numbers demand it, to let go if it improves the whole. It is impartial, ruthless, and in that, some say, truly just. Utility maximization is the ethical razor that leaves no room for comfort. It asks not what feels right, but what is right, in terms that can be counted, measured, compared. And when the dust of emotion clears, it leaves you with this: a world slightly better than before, paid for in difficult decisions, a morality not of purity, but of impact. The social contract is not paperwork. It's not a handshake or a constitution or a dusty rule book. Rousseau meant something far more radical, the idea that legitimate politics, real freedom, can only emerge when individuals come together and create a collective will that reflects everyone, not just the powerful, not just the loud, not just the majority. He called it the general will, not a poll, not a compromise, but a deep shared intention that rises from people choosing to live not just beside one another, but with one another as one body. This doesn't mean giving up freedom. It means reshaping it. Before the contract, humans are scattered, free, but vulnerable. Private will reigns. Greed, fear, competition infect every choice. The strongest dominate, the weakest hide. Rousseau's solution isn't control, it's unification. By forming a society based on the general will, people don't surrender liberty. They trade it for something deeper, autonomy rooted in mutual respect. They obey no one but the collective self. In doing so, they are more free, not less. But here's the hard part. The general will is not simply what people want. It is what they would will if they were fully rational, fully moral, fully aware of the common good. It might contradict individual desire. It might demand sacrifice. Because justice isn't found in the loudest voice. It's found in the voice that speaks for all. The general will is not majority rule. It is not opinion. It is the voice of a people seeing themselves as a whole. Most societies today mistake legality for legitimacy, but Rousseau was after something purer, a contract that isn't imposed from above, but forged from within, where the laws are not chains but expressions of collective freedom, where each citizen, in serving the whole, also protects themselves, because the whole is them. There is no ruler and ruled. There is only the sovereign people, governing themselves through the shared will that binds them. To embrace the social contract is to accept that freedom is not isolation, it is connection. It is choosing the common over the convenient, the future over the moment, the whole over the part. And in that sacred agreement, the citizen is born not as a subject to power, but as a builder of it. The general will. The general will is not what most people want. It is what the people would will if they were not distracted, not divided, not seduced by private desires. Rousseau drew a line through the heart of every society. On one side, personal interest, loud and immediate. On the other, the collective good, quieter, deeper, harder to grasp, but ultimately more enduring. The general will is not the majority vote. It is not public opinion. It is the voice that emerges when individuals stop asking, "What benefits me?" and start asking, "What strengthens us?" This idea cuts against modern instincts. Most are taught to defend their rights, protect their property, speak their truth. But Rousseau asked for something more difficult, self-transcendence. He believed freedom was not found in doing whatever one wants, but in aligning the self with a deeper order. True liberty, he argued, is obeying a law one gives to oneself, not in isolation, but in union with the common good. And when that happens, the citizen is not oppressed by the collective, they are elevated by it. The general will is not manufactured. It is discovered. It emerges through dialogue, through reflection, through conflict that clarifies rather than destroys. And because it represents the whole, it has a strange authority greater than any single desire, yet only real if built from the willingness of each individual to think beyond themselves. It is the will of a people thinking as one, not because they are the same, but because they choose to belong to something greater than their parts. But this is also where danger lurks, because the general will can be claimed by those in power, twisted into dogma, weaponized against dissent. Rousseau knew this. He warned that it must remain grounded in real participation, real equality, real care for the whole. Without that, it becomes a mask for tyranny, a fiction used to crush the very freedom it promised to uphold. The general will ask for more than agreement. It asks for transformation, a shift from consumer to citizen, from isolated self to shared purpose. It doesn't erase individuality. It reveals a higher version of it, one that finds dignity not in standing apart, but in standing together for something no single voice could imagine alone. Mind-body dualism. Mind-body dualism is the fracture at the heart of modern thought. Descartes stood at the threshold of certainty and split the world in two: res cogitans, the thinking thing, and res extensa, the extended thing, mind and body, consciousness and matter, one invisible, indivisible, inward, the other measurable, physical, spread across space. The human being, he claimed, is both, but not as one, as two, intertwined but separate, a ghost in a machine, a soul peering through flesh. This split wasn't just philosophical, it became foundational. The body became object, the mind became subject. Science turned its gaze outward, dissecting nerves, muscles, and bones, while psychology turned inward, toward thought, feeling, reason. And yet, the more deeply we've looked in either direction, the more unstable the boundary becomes. Where does thought end and electricity begin? Where does pain live, in the nerves or in the meaning of suffering? Descartes gave us a clean line, but life keeps smudging it. Still, the original dualism carries immense weight. It gives birth to the idea that the self is not the body, but the one inside the body, that the mind can float free, undisturbed by the decay of flesh, that death touches only matter, not the essence of who we are. For some, this offers comfort, for others, alienation, because to separate mind from body is also to divide feeling from flesh, identity from action, reason from instinct. It makes the body a vessel, useful but distant, a tool but not a truth. Yet every emotion twists through muscles, every thought is etched in posture. The brain, seat of mind, is also blood and salt and pulse. So where does the mind end and the body begin? Descartes said the pineal gland, a guess that now feels quaint. But the deeper truth may be that the line was always blurred, that the body thinks and the mind aches, and what we call self is born not from separation, but from their collision. To live within mind-body dualism is to feel the tension of being two and one at once, to speak from the soul while breathing through lungs, to reason with a mind that tires, to love with a heart that races. Descartes drew the boundary. Life dares you to cross it. Substance monism. Substance monism is the idea that there are not many things. There is only one infinite, eternal substance, unfolding itself in endless forms, and that substance is God, or nature, or both. For Spinoza, they were the same word for the same reality, not a deity above the world, but a divine reality that is the world. Everything that exists, thought, body, sky, sorrow, flame, is not separate, not created from outside, but is simply a mode of the one substance expressing itself through infinite variation. This is not pantheism in the poetic sense. It is rigorous, radical ontology. Spinoza didn't just say that God is in everything. He said everything is God, not metaphorically, literally. There is no gap between creator and creation, no sacred realm beyond the physical. The divine is not elsewhere. It is here, in the logic of how a tree grows, in the geometry of thought, in the trembling of joy and the pain of loss. There is only one substance, infinite in attributes, and everything that exists is a modification of it. This changes everything. There is no hierarchy of being, no soul trapped in a fallen body, no war between spirit and flesh. Mind and matter are not opposites. They are two ways of seeing the same thing. Thought is the inner voice of nature. Extension is its outward form. Dualisms dissolve. The human being is not a stranger in the universe, but a necessary expression of it. And that expression, though finite, is part of something infinite, inseparable, indivisible, eternal. Substance monism is not just metaphysics. It's a spiritual awakening. It tells you that you are not outside nature. You are not alien to the divine. You are the divine in a finite mode, and so is everything else. There is no fall, no exile, no other realm to reach. There is only understanding, clarity of vision, through which freedom emerges. Because when you realize you are part of the order of nature and that nothing happens outside that order, resentment dies, fear quiets. You no longer curse the storm. You seek to understand it. To live within substance monism is to surrender separation, to see the sacred not in some distant heaven, but in the breath you take, the mind you think with, the light on a wall. Everything is one. Everything is God. Everything is home. Determinism versus free will. Determinism versus free will is not just a debate. It's a wound, a tear running through the center of human identity, tugging at the question no one can stop asking. Do I choose this, or is it chosen for me? Every decision, every hesitation, every triumph and failure sits beneath this weight. Are your thoughts yours, or are they echoes of genes, childhood, culture, chemistry, playing out a script you didn't write? Determinism says everything has a cause. Every effect is chained to what came before. The universe is not random. It is a vast machine humming with laws and logic. The planets move because of gravity. The river flows because of slope. And you act because of neurons, memories, conditions. Even your rebellion is part of the pattern. Even your cry for freedom was coded by what came before. In determinism, there is no room for magic, only cause and consequence, only the next inevitable step. But then there's free will, the unshakable sense that you could have done otherwise, that you are not a puppet, that choice isn't an illusion, it's the core of who you are, that even when the odds are stacked, you can still say no, still change, still step off the track and write a different ending. Free will doesn't need proof. It lives in the way the heart beats faster before a decision, in the pause before you speak, in the way regret clings to actions you believe you could have avoided. And yet, these two truths refuse to reconcile. Determinism offers comfort. If all is cause, then perhaps guilt dissolves. Perhaps everything unfolds as it must, but it also strips away agency, flattens responsibility, and turns love, art, sacrifice into side effects. Free will offers dignity, but also the terrifying weight of accountability. If you can choose, then every cruelty, every mischance, every failure, that was yours. Some try to merge them, say freedom is real within the pattern, that will and causality are not enemies but partners, that freedom is not randomness but responsiveness, that we are shaped, yes, but also shaping. Others say the whole debate is a trap, that asking either or is the mistake, that life is lived in the tension, not in the answer. To live between determinism and free will is to live awake, to act as though your choices matter, even if the stars whisper otherwise, to carry the burden of authorship in a book you didn't start, and to write anyway, as if the pen is in your hand, as if the next line has not yet been written. Tabula rasa. Tabula rasa is the radical idea that you were not born knowing, that the mind at birth is not etched with truth, not infused with instinctive knowledge or divine impressions, but blank, a smooth surface, an untouched page. For Locke, this was not a diminishment of human dignity, but its foundation, because if the mind is a slate, then everything written on it, every belief, fear, dream, and desire comes from experience, from life, and that means nothing is fixed. Everything can be learned, unlearned, rewritten. This was a revolution. In Locke's time, many believed that knowledge was innate, that the soul entered the world carrying hidden truths, but tabula rasa stripped away that mysticism. It said, you are made, not born, shaped by touch, by sight, by sound, by the long, slow unfolding of moments. All knowledge begins in sensation, and sensation becomes reflection, and reflection becomes thought. There is no shortcut. There is no secret wisdom waiting inside you. There is only the world, pressing itself into your consciousness, line by line. But this blankness is not emptiness. It is potential. It is the terrifying, beautiful truth that who you are is not destiny. It is development. You were not handed an identity. You built one slowly, unknowingly, through every encounter, every mistake, every lesson absorbed without realizing. The mind is not a vault. It is a garden, and every experience is a seed. This view doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. If knowledge is learned, it can be relearned. If identity is shaped, it can be reshaped. You are not locked into the past. You are not doomed by your origins. You are changeable, moldable, forever capable of growth. The blank slate doesn't erase what you've become. It simply reminds you that none of it was inevitable. Tabula rasa demands responsibility. You can't blame nature for what experience has written. You can't hide behind fate when the hand that writes is still in motion. And perhaps that's what makes it so daunting. There's no final draft, no script handed down, only a living text shaped by what you choose to notice, absorb, resist, and become. You began as a blank page. What follows is entirely up to the ink of living. Leviathan. Leviathan is not a monster of fear. It is a monster of necessity. Hobbes summoned it from the raw depths of human nature, not to terrorize, but to contain the terror already inside us. Without it, life collapses into what he called the state of nature, a brutal, ungoverned arena where no law binds, no trust holds, and no promise lasts. In that state, every man is against every other, and what follows is not freedom, but a kind of war, silent or violent, of all against all. Life there is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. So Hobbes made a trade, liberty for order, chaos for structure. He imagined people coming together, not out of love, but out of fear, fear of death, fear of loss, fear of one another. And in that fear, they make a pact to give up certain freedoms, to lay down their arms, and to hand over power to a single sovereign force. That force is the Leviathan, a state, a ruler, a collective authority that stands above individuals and keeps them in check, not because it is morally superior, but because it is strong enough to prevent collapse. The Leviathan does not emerge gently. It is not a creature of compromise. It speaks with a singular voice. It punishes swiftly. It holds the sword and the scales. Its legitimacy comes not from divine right or inherited nobility, but from the consent of the governed, however reluctant that consent may be. People obey because the alternative is worse. Not tyranny, but anarchy. Not oppression, but obliteration. And yet, this vision is not without its darkness. The Leviathan preserves peace, but it does so by concentrating power. It demands obedience in exchange for security. It does not ask to be loved, only feared enough to be respected. Hobbes did not trust human virtue. He trusted structure, enforcement, the cold logic of necessity, and in that he offered a grim salvation, stability through surrender. To understand Leviathan is to understand that peace is not natural. It is constructed, maintained, imposed. Hobbes wasn't offering utopia. He was building a dam to hold back the flood, and he dared to ask, what are you willing to give up? Not to live nobly, but to live at all. Cogito, ergo sum cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, is not just a sentence. It is a moment of existential defiance, uttered in the dark. Descartes stripped everything away. The senses could deceive, the body could be an illusion, the world might be a dream, but there, in the silence of radical doubt, one truth remained, the doubting itself, the thinking, the questioning. If everything else could be false, the very act of thinking proved something undeniable. Something was happening. Someone was doing the thinking. Therefore, I am. This wasn't arrogance, it was desperation. Descartes wasn't building a philosophy. He was trying to survive the collapse of certainty. He questioned everything down to the bone until nothing was left but this: thought, consciousness as the last flicker of light in a room gone dark. And in that flicker, he found the foundation, not the body, not the senses, but the mind itself, the thinking self, a being not made of flesh or dust, but of awareness. This was the birth of the modern subject, the idea that existence isn't anchored in the external world, but in the internal one, not in being seen, but in seeing, not in what is known, but in the knowing itself. The cogito made the self undeniable, not because it's visible, but because it can't stop speaking. Even doubt is proof. Even fear is proof, because something must exist to feel it. But the cogito is also a prison. Once Descartes affirmed the self, the world had to be rebuilt from within it. Everything became filtered through the thinking mind. The body became secondary. Nature became mechanical, and slowly the self, once saved, became isolated, a thinker behind glass, a mind in a skull, a spectator of a world it couldn't fully touch. Yet the power of I think, therefore I am remains. It is the spark that cannot be extinguished, the irreducible center of experience, not the ego, not the personality, but the raw, pulsing flame of consciousness itself. Descartes gave us that flame, and with it, a terrifying gift, the knowledge that even if all else disappears, thought remains, and where there is thought, there is being. Even if that being stands alone, whispering into the void, it is still there, still real, still undeniable. The allegory of the cave. The allegory of the cave is not just a story, it's a mirror. Plato carved it into the heart of philosophy as a warning, a challenge, and a prophecy all at once. Inside the cave, people are chained, not by force but by habit, by illusion, by the shadows flickering on the wall. These shadows are all they know, reflections of objects they never see, echoes of a reality they've never touched. And to them, these shadows are truth. They point, they argue, they build lives around shapes that aren't real, and they never look back. But then, one person is freed. They stumble, blinded by light, not because the light is cruel, but because their eyes have only known darkness. They are dragged by reason, by pain, by something within them, out of the cave, and for the first time, they see the objects behind the shadows, then the mouth of the cave, then the sun itself. It is not a gentle awakening, it is disorienting, humbling, terrifying, because the truth is not just brighter, it undoes everything that once felt certain. This journey is not a metaphor for education, it is education. True learning for Plato is not the absorption of facts, it is the turning of the soul, a violent reorientation from illusion to insight. And once someone has seen the light, really seen it, they cannot unsee it. They cannot go back to the shadows and pretend they are enough. But if they do return, if they descend back into the cave to tell the others what they found, they are not welcomed as heroes. They are mocked, feared, hated, because the cave does not let go easily. Most people live in caves of their own making, comfort, culture, convenience. They trust what they see, hear, believe. They resist being pulled out, because leaving the cave means leaving behind the familiar. And truth, real truth, always costs comfort. It always wounds the ego before it frees the mind. To walk the path of the cave's escape is to accept that knowledge is not a gift. It's a burden. It separates you. It scars you. But it also opens the world. And once you've stood in the light, no shadow can ever fully satisfy again, because you've touched something real, and realness, once known, becomes the only thing worth chasing. Golden mean. The golden mean is not balance for balance's sake. It is the hard-won harmony that lives between chaos and cowardice, indulgence and denial. Aristotle didn't see virtue as a commandment, handed down from above. He saw it as a practice, something cultivated in the real world, where people stumble, correct, and learn to steer between too much and too little. Virtue, in this view, is not perfection, it's proportion, and the golden mean is the thread that runs through every noble life, thin and fragile, but strong enough to hold everything together. Courage, for example, is not the absence of fear. It's what lives between rashness and paralysis. Generosity is not giving everything away. It's the middle point between greed and wastefulness. Honesty is not brutal bluntness. It's the place between deceit and cruelty. Every virtue is a tension, a line held tight between two opposing failures. The golden mean doesn't erase extremes. It frames them. It uses them to define the space where something human, grounded, and worthy can live. Most people drift, pulled by desire, by fear, by habit. They swing too far in one direction and then overcorrect. The golden mean is not a destination you reach once. It is something you recalibrate every day. And it's different for each person, each moment. What is courageous for one may be reckless for another. What is generous in one context may be excessive in another. The mean is not static. It breathes. It listens. It requires judgment, not rules. That's what makes it difficult and beautiful, because the golden mean doesn't promise clarity. It demands wisdom. It demands that you pay attention, not just to what you feel, but to what is called for. To live by the mean is to step into a lifelong practice of discernment, of self-awareness, of asking again and again, what does this situation truly require of me? And then acting, not from impulse, but from virtue. Aristotle didn't want saints or soldiers. He wanted citizens, people who could live fully in the world with all its mess and motion and still choose the path that leads to human flourishing. The golden mean is not easy, but it is possible. And in walking it, step by step, we don't just become good, we become whole.